One split-second choice changed everything. My life was never the same again. I decided to go to Subway instead of Dairy Queen. They were across the street from each other, and I was passing through town during lunchtime. Ended up hitting it off with the woman making my sandwich. Next week is our 11-year anniversary. My grandparents met this way too. Sandwiches are a great way of finding love, apparently. I flipped a coin to decide if I was going to quit my job. Heads, so I quit. A friend saw my lights on that night and stopped by to see what I was doing. I told him what happened, and he told me it was great timing. They let someone go at his job that day. He set me up with an interview for the next day, and I was hired. There were only 3 people who worked there. I eventually became the plant manager and have been working there in management ever since. Most of these answers are really happy, and mine really isn't, but it does fit the question. Mine would be double-checking on my wife before bed. She suffers from PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and had just kind of been off all day. I checked with her a couple of times, and she said everything was all right each time. It might sound weird, but she was too happy and calm, but kind of sad at the same time. It just didn't sit right with me. She said she was going to bed, and we kissed, and I asked again, and she chuckled and said to stop worrying. She went upstairs, and I waited a few seconds and went up to say I think something's wrong. I stopped her from not being alive anymore that night. Normally, I'd take her for her word, but that decision was 12 years ago, and we're having the best version of our lives because I listened to my gut and went and checked. I walked away from a condo purchase the night before closing, was reading through the HOA meeting minutes at midnight and found buried notes about a major special assessment coming. Felt insane backing out so late, but something didn't quite sit right. The building got hit with a $40,000 assessment 6 months later. Best gut decision I ever made. Fell overboard in a whitewater rafting incident. Stuck in pitch dark underwater, under a lot of rafts squeezed together, oxygen running out soon. I tried to surface, but the rafts were too tightly packed on top. I went into cold survival logic mode. The alternative was to drown. I decided to move in one direction under the rafts only. I figured that I'd eventually hit the edge of the flotilla. I crawled upside down underneath the rafts in the water blind. Finally, I found an opening to the sweetest air I've ever breathed in. I got pulled into one of the rafts and was saved. Oh good, there's my fear of ever going whitewater rafting again. I'd lost that for a while. I'm so lucky you stopped me from ever doing that beautiful and exhilarating sport ever again. Thanks. I decided to keep driving. Probably saved my life. One night I drove home from working evening shift, like 2 miles, and when I glanced in the rearview mirror, I had chills when I saw the headlights behind me at a red light. I got to my house and was about to park, but then I heard a voice in my head tell me to keep driving, so I did. Turned down a back alley, I lived in a city, and that car followed me. Took another right turn, so I was now going back in a circle, and they continued to follow me. I called my dad to stay on the phone as I drove to a police station. The car stopped following when a cop car pulled up behind us, coincidentally. Next morning, I read about an armed carjacking in the area about an hour after my incident. One time I had a car cut me off badly. I honked and I flipped them off. For me, that was the end of the interaction. But then they took the next exit, my exit, so I was forced to follow them. Then they took the next right, which was my right. Then they turned down a street, my street. Then they proceeded to the end of the court past my house. But my driveway was full and that's where I needed to park. The end of that street was a small circle. I had to drive around the circle to find an open spot. But as I rounded the circle looking for a spot, they nailed the frickin' gas and sped down my street and out of my neighborhood like a bat out of heck. Until he peeled out, I was thinking, oh great, I live near the butthole that cut me off. After he took off, I realized he was taking random turns and thought that I was following him. A family in my marina announced that they're moving away the following week. They were going to turn their sailboat over to a broker to sell it for them. I mentioned that I was contemplating a larger boat with a smaller engine and I'd be interested in theirs. I asked what price they'd consider. He said 10 grand. I said, okay, and we shook on it. That boat was worth over 24K. I got a wheelbarrow from the Marina Corral and removed stuff from my smaller boat, walked it over to their dock and loaded it on board. That was 10 years ago. I still live on the boat 6 months out of the year. Sweet. I'm gonna go back to college and finish my degree. I was talking to some dude and all he said was, why can't your plan B just be your original plan A again? Well, guess who fought to re-enroll after failing out? won that fight, and finished with his master's degree. In middle school, my best friend invited me to Knott's Berry Farm, an amusement park, with another group of kids that he was friends with. One of the girls was super cute, and rumor was that she wanted to date me. It was October time, so Knott's Scary Farm, the amusement park but with workers dressed up as monsters, was open. For all SoCal kids around this time, we all know Knott's Scary Farm with girl equals bag secured. I got to my friend's house after running some errands for my mum. There were 5 other teens there. I asked my friend how we were getting there, and he said he was driving his dad's car. He was underage and had no license, by the way. I was nervous, but I wanted to look cool, so I said, okay. Right before we got into the car, I had the worst feeling come over me. In approximately 5 seconds, I felt a drop in my stomach to a bottomless pit, a hot flash followed by chills, and intense nausea. I literally left without making a sound, running to a nearby Starbucks and using a stranger's phone and asking my mother to pick me up. I felt so embarrassed. I knew I was going to get crap all month from my friend and probably blew my shot with that girl. A few hours later, they were on their way home on the freeway and lost control of the vehicle. None of them made it. Early 20s, and my sister asked me to drive her to the music shop to buy a guitar. I point one out and say, that black and gold one is gorgeous, get that one. She tries it out and says, I don't know if I'm really feeling this one. I tell her that if she doesn't buy it, I will, and she says, you don't even play guitar, what are you going to do with it? Walked out of the store with that guitar on a complete whim, spent 3 months learning before I started doing open mics, making friends at the music shop, joining a band, and having the time of my life throughout my 20s. I'm working full-time now, but I still noodle around with my guitars when I have free time. My best friend said she wanted to move more than 2,000 miles across the country back to her home state and asked me if I wanted to come. I didn't think. I said, yep, I'll go. We moved. Less than a year afterwards, I met my now wife. Couldn't be happier. 11 years ago, my friend drunkenly asked me to marry her. I said yes, and we've been happily married for almost 9 years. 1980 Keesler Air Force Base. After finishing school, everybody just got their first sets of orders. Mine were to Alaska, which I was okay with. I was passing through another part of the dorm, where I don't usually go, and I heard a guy say, where the hell is Cape Cod? I'm from Massachusetts, so I stuck my head in and told him. In short, he didn't want to go there, and I suggested we request a swap. As a result, I went to the state-of-the-art brand new radar station instead of a very old site in Alaska. I lived at home with my parents and commuted, and within a year I'd moved in with my high school sweetheart, who is still upstairs today on Valentine's Day. I decided not to get into an elevator with my ex and her new boyfriend, so I took the stairs instead. On the 3rd flight, I found a discarded scratch-off ticket that ended up being worth 50 grand? It's the only time in my life where being socially awkward actually paid off my mortgage. It might actually be the only time in the world where being socially awkward achieved that exact milestone, so I wouldn't sell yourself short there. Be thankful. I was going through old text messages with my then-girlfriend and realized I'd become a very negative person. I decided right there to always look for the bright side of things. It takes some effort, but that was 12 years ago, and I am much happier. It's become second nature after a while. I was about to ignore a random invite to a party because I was tired and didn't feel like going out. It was an invite from my classmate, in a university that I joined like a week ago. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds thinking, maybe I'll just stay home. Then I said, screw it, I'll go. A good chance to make some new friends in the university. Met someone that night who ended up changing my life in the best way. Today's our 5th anniversary, and we've been happily together ever since. 90% of living is just showing up. Got a party invite from a buddy of mine to play an online game. Met a guy in that guild who ended up being one of my best friends, who ended up getting me a job in a career that I love, making more money than I ever did before. Crazy to think how different my life is after gaming with a stranger 10 years ago. Eating dinner at Applebee's. My future husband was my waiter that night. Haha, how did that go? Here are your mashed potatoes. You're cute. What's your number? Saw a random advert advertising scuba diving certification. I signed up thinking, why not? I'm now an aspiring diving instructor. Said yes to adopting a stray dog that followed me home. 10-second, sure, why not kind of moment. Now he's my best buddy for 8 years. Little decisions hit different sometimes. My friends and I traveled to a city that none of us had visited before for a music festival. On the last night of the festival, my friends were in the taxi and going back to the Airbnb. At the last second before getting in, I decided not to and to go see what the local nightlife was about. None of my friends wanted to stay out, so they gave me the second key to the apartment and off they went. I went into a bar alone, met a girl, and we talked all night. By complete coincidence, it turned out that she was just about to move to the city I lived in to study. This was 3.5 years ago, and we're still together. My school boyfriend decided to take Japanese language classes, and I decided to randomly join because I didn't have anything on Monday evenings anyway. Ended up being the one who enjoyed learning Japanese the most, moved to Japan, and have been here for the past 15 years. Volunteered to switch seats on a plane with someone, a window passenger, who was allergic to the aisle passenger's pet many rows in front of me. I married the woman in the middle seat 8 years later. This year is our 20th anniversary. Answering a random call at 7 p.m. HR recruiter for my current employer. I was dropping my friend off at the train station to go into the city to see her brother. As the doors were closing, I jumped in the train and rode with her to the city to keep her company, then turned around and went home. I loved hanging out with her. Still do. We started dating about a year after and have been together for the past 25 years. During lockdown in 2020, I decided to video call my brother for a catch-up. He had not long ago had a child and was super busy. I was expecting another child in early 2021, and life was hectic as we were both back in our work at our respective jobs as key workers. No furlough by then. I wouldn't normally have just video called him. To be honest, I'd usually just shoot him a text, but I felt like it, and we made a coffee and had a good old chat as we drank the coffee in our respective houses. He died 2 days later in an accident, and it was the last time that I spoke to him. Make the call, go to the party, schedule that catch-up. You really do never know if you'll get another chance. Walking through a crosswalk and someone sped up to the corner and crossed right towards me at advanced speed to complete a left turn across incoming traffic that he was trying to beat. Didn't know if he'd seen me or not, so I didn't know if he'd slow down or swerve, thus dictating which way to jump. I jumped back, thank goodness, and he missed me by a hair. Literally drove right beside me. I saw his face, and I think in his speed and recklessness, he never saw me despite the surrounding cars honking at him. Took me several days to get over how close this was to death for me. I had a personal rule for myself in 2011 that I wouldn't ever send a message first to a man on a dating app. This was a couple of years after my divorce. At the time, most men didn't bother with captions under their photos, but I was looking through a guy's profile and there were captions on all of his. One was of him sitting on a log with a teenage boy, and the caption was that he and his son were on a camping trip next to Little Mill Creek. At the time, I happened to live right next to Little Mill Creek, and I was so intrigued by the coincidence that I sent him a message. Well, long story short, too late. We met, knew we were crazy about each other by date number 4, got engaged 10 months later, and were very happily married for 10 years until he died of leukemia 3 years ago. Ooh, a bittersweet one that. I'm still glad that you both lit up each other's lives in any case. There are a lot of random encounters leading to that first date here in this group of stories. It's been a nice little burst of sunshine after some of the darker topics that I've recorded here lately. When I was 6, my parents brought me to a horse stable where they offered trail rides. The manager said I was too little, so we turned to leave. As we were leaving, a lady that owned her own horse, and who kept it at that same facility, stopped and asked what was wrong. I had tears in my eyes. I said something along the lines of, they said I was too little to ride a horse. She asked if I wanted to ride her horse. I looked at my parents. They said it was up to me, so I immediately said yes. 36 years later, I own 15 horses. I've been professionally training and competing, and I own my own hunter-jumper training and lesson operation. I don't typically stall when making a decision, but since it's Valentine's Day, I'll add that back in '97, my mum and I got to talking about girls at school. I was a junior in high school. She suggested that I take a bunch of roses into school and hand them out to girls, and after a moment's hesitation, I was down for it. I took a few dozen roses in, and girls loved them. One of the girls I gave a rose to later became my wife, married now about 20 years. I was applying for PhD programs. The deadlines all fall at roughly the same time. The way it works is that you contact a potential PhD supervisor, and if they like your project and agree to supervise you, they give the go-ahead and you then apply. The application process itself is kind of time-consuming. You need to fill in forms and provide documents on top of a cover letter and research plan. Then you also have to apply for funding for that project, which might or might not be tied to the specific university. I'd done that process 3 times already, but there was one potential supervisor who hadn't got back to me. I was prepared to write him off when he emailed me, 2 days before the deadline. He was actually on a fellowship program abroad for the next 2 years, so couldn't supervise me, but one of his more junior colleagues would be a good match. I was tired from all the applications, and I wasn't familiar with her work, so I was prepared to just leave it, but then I was like, oh, what the hell, I'll contact her and see. She replied immediately. I rushed through the application process to meet the deadline. I ended up getting accepted with funding, and that's the best thing that happened to me. She was wonderful, super smart, and a great supervisor. COVID happened shortly after I started, and I had a lot of issues, and I think it's fair to say I might not have finished and graduated at all without her. I bought $4,000 worth of Apple in 2000. When I was 14, I woke up, and the first thought in my head that morning was, it would be really cool to be an exchange student. Walked into my parents' room to tell them, and started figuring it out shortly after. I was 15 when I did my exchange year, and it changed me profoundly. It shaped the rest of my life, and I still draw on the lessons and self-reliance I learned that year. 1 a.m. on November 13th, 2023, I decided to go to the ER and tell somebody that I was an alcoholic, and it was going to take my life. 824 days later, and I'm glad to be here. Stopped at a grocery store on the way home from college. I was following a classmate home because we take the same windy route to the highway, but something inside me said, you should stop here and get XYZ. We were only another 30 seconds from the freeway entrance, and I saw a big accident as I passed after shopping. Turns out my friend got hit by a semi while merging, and I would have been right behind her if I hadn't stopped for groceries. No telling if I'd be dead too, but there wasn't much left of her. Spoke at her funeral, but I'm still sad to this day. I decided to look to the side before letting the belt tighten. Seeing my cat staring at me, not knowing what was going on, snapped me out of it, and probably saved my life. This was 4 days ago. I have no words for all the supportive replies I'm getting. I'm crying, all I can say is thank you. Truly, thank you all from the bottom of my heart. Apparently telling my mum the truth of her manipulative behavior is fighting. She doesn't talk to me anymore, and it is wonderful, amazing, peaceful. Stick with it, it's the best peace I've ever had. Yeah, well, the truth can hurt some people, huh? With any luck, if enough people have the same conversation with her, maybe she'll eventually get help. This doesn't always have to end in no contact forever, but it's understandable when that's what's best for the victims of these people's previous behavior. Deleted the dating apps. I feel like a weight has been lifted. Free. Decided to go out for a drink on a weeknight. I'd been working crazy hours, 7 days a week for about a year. Never saw my friends, zero social life. Got the call for the weekly meetup and decided that I needed a night out and could catch up on sleep another night. As I sipped my first beer, my now wife walked in and smiled at me. We've been together almost 20 years. Threw a punch instead of just walking away. 28 years ago, and it still messes up my life. One of my first TV jobs was as a researcher for a kids' comedy and science show. On the first day, I was given a small task which I finished in about half an hour. The producer seemed a bit annoyed because he had nothing else for me to do. I offered to feed my research into the scripts and he grumbled, well, we haven't written any yet. Without really thinking, I said, shall I write one? He laughed condescendingly and said, sure. I ended up co-writing the whole series and starring in it as a character I'd created. When I was in my mid-20s, I'd worked a long day out in the cold mist. I was dead tired and felt gross. I got home and debated cooking dinner or going out. I decided to go out. Sat next to a young lady at a restaurant bar. We started chatting. She was from another part of the country, in town for one night only. Flash forward, we've been married for almost a decade with several children. Sometimes I wonder if life would be different if I'd just decided to stay in and cook that evening. When I spontaneously decided, yeah, I'll adopt these 2 kittens. Out on an HHH run, and a mate said he needed a hand to sail his new 38-foot yacht from Sweden to Norway. We went via Finland and took 3 months. From what the frick to oh my god, the most bizarre emergency calls that left first responders speechless. I'm a volunteer firefighter in South Texas, and one of my weirdest calls has to be something that happened just a few months ago. We receive a page saying the local naval air station has a plane down, requesting tanker and manpower assistance. We respond with about 6 guys in our tanker and our command truck. We get to the NAS, drive out to the brush behind the runways and see 2 small grass fires as well as some smoldering wreckage of a naval T-45 trainer. We're told to stay by our trucks until the wreckage is cleared by the NAS firefighters, so we just stand around shooting the breeze. My lieutenant and I are standing there when we see one of the naval firefighters hauling it around the front of our truck yelling, "Climb up, get off the ground." We don't question the guy and almost vault on top of our truck. I look over the side, not knowing what to expect, and I see a frickin' wild pig running towards the truck. She hits the side, bounces back a little, snorts, and runs off into the brush, where we now notice a pack of piglets coming around her, then following her deeper in. Then we look at the NAS guy and he just shrugs and says, "I don't know what set her off, but she charged me." Then he got back down and went about his business while we stood there looking at each other, laughing our butts off. My mum's a paramedic and dinner conversations are usually interesting. She had one partner that just seemed to attract all of the crazy calls. We'll call him Pat. Both of these happened while she was riding with him. They get a call in for a woman in labor, not quite full term, but close. When they get there, she's already spread out saying she has to push. They never even had the chance to get her on a stretcher. Delivering babies isn't that unusual for paramedics, but this did not go as planned. After 5 or so minutes of straining and groaning and pushing with my mum at her head and her partner Pat on the business end, they had a successful delivery of an approximately 10-pound turd right into Pat's hands. Seems that this lady had been constipated for ages and not done anything about it. When the time finally came, she mistook the stomach cramps for labor. Another day, another call, they meet up in the projects with an overweight woman complaining of chest pains. Usually, when there's a chest pain call, the patient is not up and walking around and cussing at everyone and everything in sight. This woman was doing all of the above, completely shirtless. She kept loudly repeating that her chest hurt while my mum and Pat asked her to let them take her vitals and to explain where the pain was. Eventually, the woman had had enough of them not understanding her and walked up to Pat. She screamed, "I said my chest hurts," picked up one of her huge, saggy chest bags and flopped it straight into Pat's hand. She wasn't having heart pains, she was having literal chest pains. Ah, poor Pat. There's more, there's always more. But those are my favorites of the funny calls. Getting an absolutely ridiculous run every now and then really helps them deal with some of the horrible things they face. Oh my god. Either one of those stories would have been a contender for the most memorable story in this group. I do read out and then forget a lot of stories doing this job, and I'm calling it right now that the 10-pound turd baby will live rent-free in my head forever. I was an EMT in a small city in Rhode Island. There were 2 things I've seen that stand above the rest. 1, we were called to a public park where the police had a homeless man with a knife cornered who was obviously on something. We later found it to be angel dust. The knife was a folding knife with a curved hook-like blade. In a desperate attempt to accomplish something, the man stuck the knife into the left side of his abdomen and pulled the blade quickly to the right, slicing himself wide open and essentially disemboweling himself. When we arrived at the scene, he was sitting on the ground with his legs stretched out with a good portion of his intestines in his lap. We wrapped his midsection with a cellophane-like product that we typically use for pressure bandages and brought him to the hospital. He lived, but he had an interesting night to say the least. In short, if you do phencyclidine, you may end up gutting yourself. And then there was the other story. We were called to the scene of a motorcycle accident on a local highway. The driver was a young male who was driving a rice rocket. He had lost control and went into the guardrail on the left side of the highway. It was later determined that he was traveling in excess of 90 miles per hour when he hit. His left arm was caught in the guardrail, and the rest of him continued forward in a way that his chest was ripped open at his sternum. One of the troopers on the scene called us over to something that we'd found on the highway about 40 yards farther down. We identified it as the man's heart that had blown out of his chest on impact and shot down the highway. In short, without a ribcage to stop it, your heart can go quite a distance. Working a shift with an ambulance crew. I'm not an EMT myself, I was there for a company building a product to help EMTs and dispatchers to communicate. Went to a call about intense abdominal pains. Got to the apartment, knock, and we can hear a guy yelling from deep inside the apartment saying, "Bust it down!" So the EMTs did break in. We go in and find a guy fully clothed, lying on his bed in a fetal position, moaning. The EMTs start taking his vitals. He's breathing, pulse is fast but strong, temperature is a little up, but nothing unusual. So they fire off the questions about food, bedroom life, injuries in the past, anything at all that could result in abdominal pains. And one of them is trying to feel his gut and hits something and just turns pale. She says, "This guy's got a huge cyst or something. It's hard as a rock, and it's inflamed. We'd better roll." So they throw him on the gurney and out we go. I'm audio taping the whole conversation back to dispatch as we run down the hall. We load up and head out. 2 minutes into the ride, the guy screams and jerks and then faints. One of the EMTs notices a big dark wet spot on the guy's butt, so they start cutting away his trousers. We arrive just as they clear away enough to see that he's bleeding from the butt. I go in with the team and start the prep work, but the bleeding is getting worse, so finally into surgery, where they removed a softball and a baseball from his rear end. Apparently, he lubed up, put the baseball in with the prophylactic, enjoyed it, so he went bigger and got the softball, but then the cramps began. Here's the most recent story that borders between hilarious and horrible. My mom is a supervisor to paramedics now, and is the one that mostly decides when they need more than one unit on a scene, or if they need to call out the other company in town for backup. We're in Alabama, and the temperatures are already obnoxious. All of this will be relevant later, I promise. About 2 weeks ago, my mum got a call for stomach problems in a trailer park. When they got to the scene, there were nearly 100 people laid out in the yard vomiting and having diarrhea everywhere. There had been a Hispanic family having some sort of reunion. Someone made something with mayonnaise in it and left it out in the heat all day. Everybody ate it and thus suffered the consequences of Alabama heat plus mayonnaise. Mum actually had to get every unit at her company and call the other company in town for backup to transport everyone to the hospital. They transported 5 or 6 per unit on the benches in the back, and then all of the trucks had to be washed out. Mum said she took 2 or 3 showers and still felt filthy afterwards. My friend's dad had to help push some old lady's prolapsed butthole back in. That was messed up. So this one's pretty awful. I feel bad typing it out because it's pretty next level terrible. Also, it's not necessarily applicable to the topic as it occurred in a hospital, but in any case. My ex-girlfriend had a friend who was a nurse at a local hospital. One day, my ex suggests that we go to the hospital to visit said friend. Knowing that this particular hospital has absolutely stunning French fries available in their cafeteria for bargain basement prices, I agree. Upon arrival, we meet nurse friend who looks a little upset. I purchase my delicious fries, we sit down, and my ex asks her nurse friend why she looks so unhappy. Nurse friend relays the following story. A woman had recently needed surgery to remove her appendix. They'd sewn her back up and sent her on her merry way. A few days later, she was back complaining that her stitches had opened up. Nurse friend suggests to my ex and I that this was not unusual given that the patient was overweight, and my current French fry consumption ability is above par. All systems go for increased cholesterol. So the doctor had sewn this lady back up, and once again, the patient departed. The next day, she came back. Oh, her stitches had opened up again. Odd, but still not unexplainable. Nurse friend suggests to the patient that she avoid any unnecessary activity. They sew her up again and she leaves. My current French fry consumption ability is average, warily chewing while waiting for multiple shoes to drop. The day that we were visiting, prior to our arrival, this woman had come back in, same issue. The stitches have pulled themselves out again. As this is the 4th time she has to be sewn up, the doctor says, "Look, you're doing something wrong here. What are you doing? Are you pulling all of these out on purpose?" The patient gets really defensive. The doctor knows something is up. Patient starts to cry. They won't let her leave until she tells them what's happening. At this point, they bring in the nurse friend who's pretty much a 22-year-old Mother Teresa. She's exactly the kind of person I'd want as a nurse. She can coax anything out of anyone. Are you ready for this? Nurse friend / 22-year-old Mother Teresa manages to get this patient to admit that it was in fact not her who was pulling the stitches out, but her fiancé. This complete sociopath has convinced the patient to allow him to do the deed with her through the hole in her belly where the doctor had removed her appendix. Apparently, this was not a painful event for the patient, even though some frickin' maniac was railing her in the guts. They made her promise not to have the stitches removed again prior to sending her out. Current French fry consumption ability, the plane has crashed into a mountain and we're done. From what I gather, they did not have to restitch her again. In short, gut effer. Why did I decide that I was ready to start doing medical stories again? Did I fool myself into thinking that these would get any less insane? Seriously, I'm an idiot. Oh well, let's see how the views do. When I was an EMT, I responded to a call where a hobo was hit by a train. He was scattered over an area of about 2 miles. I came across a shirt filled full of, shall we say, remains. When I asked for a hand, the evil monsters who I was working with gave me the guy's arm from the elbow down. I do have to admit I got a chuckle out of that later. My uncle was an EMT in a small redneck southern town. My favorite story was about a man who got drunk and fell down the stairs of a bar, breaking his legs in the process. They had to cut his pants off to get to the injury, and when they took them off, they found a cucumber taped to the side of his thigh. I asked my uncle what he did about it, and he said that they just left it there so that when he sobered up, he'd find himself in a hospital with 2 legs in a cast and a cucumber rotting on his thigh. Similar story. My mom was a nurse at a hospital in Chicagoland area. One day an old man came in because he'd lost circulation to his leg. So they cut off his pants and they found a cucumber tied to his leg. Apparently he had been at a senior's ball and wanted to make himself appear more apt. I've never understood this thought. If a girl feels or sees your cucumber and you take her home, she's gonna find out real quick you were falsely advertising. Just hope she likes you, I guess? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Guy stuck at the top of a tree trying to rescue a kitten. Cats don't get stuck in trees, people do. The best part was the burly sanitation worker rubbing it in, asking him if he ever saw a kitten skeleton up in a tree. One of my cop buddies works in the West Valley division of the LAPD. You know the movie Clueless? He patrols the area near where Alicia Silverstone gets robbed in the movie. Anywho, him and his partner were driving around when he got the 5150 call, otherwise known as crazy person on the loose. However, the person wasn't loose so much as their bowels were. A 50-year-old man was sitting on a ledge and crapping over the other side. His pants were nowhere to be found, so my buddy and his partner get there and approach the guy. It smells awful, but they still begin talking with him. He seemed a bit hungover. He had probably been drinking during the day and got dehydrated. He tried to explain to them who he was, but nothing was coherent. My buddy and his partner didn't know what to do. They really didn't want to transport a man with crap running down his legs in their car. Then the partner had a good idea. They approached the guy. "Sir, how are you feeling?" My head hurts." "Oh my god, you hear that? His head hurts! Call 911! My buddy looked astonished. He radioed for an ambulance, and one had arrived in a couple of short minutes. The cop explained to the paramedics that the man was extremely dehydrated, which caused his bowels to evacuate, not just that he was super hungover. So that's how my buddy and his partner got out of schlepping a crazy man covered in poo back to the station. An unconscious woman whose toes were being eaten by cats in a hoarder's residence. My former art teacher used to work in the Forest Service, and he'd tell us stories about funny and weird stuff that happened. I still doubt the validity of this, but he had no reason to lie, and he swears by it. There were firemen out in the middle of nowhere, basically fighting a forest fire in Arizona, or a brush fire as they call it. There wasn't any real danger to people because of how remote this location was. Whether this happened on a break or right away from the fire, he didn't specify, or I've forgotten, but off in the distance they saw a figure, a brightly colored figure, walking calmly. As they squinted and started to pursue the figure, they realized there was a fully dressed and face-painted clown out in the middle of nowhere. No campgrounds, no houses for miles. And he had nothing on him. At least visibly, no big bag for basic survival. He was just calmly walking alone in the middle of the forest. When they started to get closer, but still fighting through the brush, the clown saw he was being followed and he evaded them, and was never seen again. No one had heard anything or just kept it as a secret. In short, former Forest Service worker and fireman saw a random clown strolling through the middle of a remote forest near a fire. When I was on the FD, we had a call for a power line down at a cell tower up on a hill in the middle of nowhere. This was during a bad storm. Power company trucks were all tied up already when we got toned out. We got there, and the power line for the cell tower was just lying in the road. There's a number on the shack at the bottom of the antenna, so we call the number. While trying to get a hold of someone from the cell tower, which is running on a generator and possibly still energizing the line that's laying in the street, we realize the door to the shack is unlocked, so we're all standing inside it out of the rain. The assistant chief is on his phone talking to some guy about the antenna, and then all of a sudden he goes pale white, like a ghost, and then walks out the door into the rain and tells us all to get out. Turns out the guy on the phone had told them that whatever happens, don't go in the shack because it's infested with brown recluse spiders that are attracted to the warmth. Everyone was loading their pants when they heard that. My uncle was an EMT and a fire captain for a while. He does some different training stuff now, which means he doesn't go out on calls much longer. Anyway, his weirdest story was about two guys who got killed by a farmer. His firehouse was on the border of a suburb and farming community. So with there being a lot of land, people would go ride dirt bikes and motocross bikes. These two guys liked to jump some dirt piles or what have you on this one farmer property, and the farmer didn't like that. He tried to get them to stop in various ways, but finally he'd had enough of it. One day he put up in a clearing or open pathway a thing of a high-test fishing line or something like that between two trees. One of the guys on a motorcycle came through at head level and didn't get his head taken off, but the line seriously cut into his neck and he ultimately bled out and died. My uncle was the one who was called to the scene to try and save him, but he was pretty much dead when he got there. He says the call has always kind of bugged him because it was a younger kid, like 20-something, and it was such a cruel way for the farmer to deal with his problem. I assume the guy went to jail, but I don't know. Went out on a wreck where these two out-of-state kids had overcorrected, veered off the road, hit a dirt hill, and landed in a tree. Neither of them was seriously injured, but it sure was a sight to see a brand new Tundra stuck in a tree about 6 feet off the ground. I reckon that people might have driven past that and assumed it was some sort of strange private art piece. You know how certain restaurants have fake cars dug into the buildings to look like they've crashed into them, and then they hear the screams for help for the guys in the tree? Technically not on a call, but I was stopping to render aid. Driving home on a stormy day, I see that a side road up to the local golf course is blocked off by flashing barricades. I also spy a Mercedes parked just past the barricades with its hazards on. I stop and walk up to the car to see if they need help. I'm an EMT. I shine my light in the back seat to see a man slumped over, apparently asleep. Thinking that I've got a few drunks, I move up to the driver's window and rap on the glass and shine my light in, and the driver is sitting bolt upright, unmoving, staring straight ahead. My window rapping or light doesn't cause him to blink, flinch, or move. I look over and the passenger is slumped forward onto the dash. This begins to creep me out. I call down to the sheriff station and request a code 2. No lights or sirens and a leisurely arrival. I call them to my location to help me check them out, because the doors are locked. While on the phone, I walk back to my truck to my go bag, as I'm now on the phone with dispatch, and she asks me to get a license number for the car, just as a PG&E power company cherry picker truck comes rumbling down from the closed road. I move around the truck to get the plate number, and the car is just gone. I talked to the driver of the truck, and he said there was an 80-foot tree down across the road and that he didn't think it'd be open for a day or so. So the question is, where the hell did the car go? Tree up one way, barricades down the other. It's kept me a bit unsettled when stopping at accidents and hazards since then. I had to transport from a state mental hospital halfway house kind of facility to a level 1 trauma center for abdominal pain that turned out to be from a ballpoint pen and a reverse Uno card inserted into a woman's urethra. You could see the tip of the pen when you examined her. When questioned, she wouldn't admit that she was the one who did it. She'd admit to enjoying Foley catheters, though, and insisted she needed one to be able to pee. In short, woman gave herself a Foley with a pen and an Uno card. Ugh. This one guy had accidentally strung himself up in his garage. He literally had a contraption he'd built that held him in a harness. One of his arms controlled a rope that was attached through a pulley system with an adult toy at the end. As he pulled the rope, the toy did the job on his backside. The other arm controlled the same kind of pulley, but at the end was a noose that was tied around his neck. Needless to say, he pulled a little too tight on the noose end. It was a nice, normal neighborhood, and the guy was married with kids, with a seemingly completely normal life. Oh, I've got a few. I came to an unconscious, unresponsive young male in a bathroom with a massive bleeding. Turns out he was getting frisky with a plunger, and his feet slipped out from underneath him, and it just ripped his hollow and solid organs apart. He was obviously DOA. Another was an old lady whom hadn't been seen outside of her apartment for quite some time and wasn't answering the door. We knew she had died as we could smell her from the outside. The fire department knocked down her door. I told the firefighter to go in and he was like, no way, it would be an emergency, fully knowing that she was almost 100% dead. Lights were all turned off and it was 2 a.m, so each room I had to flip the switch. There were bloody paw prints all over the place, and in the bathroom, the toilet seat had been flipped up, and there were bloody paw prints all around that as well. When I flipped the bathroom light, I was pretty sure what I'd see, but it was worse than I'd expected. The cats had started to eat her after she had died. I was 19 at the time. I'll keep this one short. We'd responded to a call where a mid-50-something-year-old, semi-frail-looking male bit his adult 20-something son, who probably outweighed the father by about 150 pounds or so, about 25 times all over his body. He had bit him everywhere. Arms, neck, torso, legs, it was ridiculous. They were deep marks too, like he was trying to rip skin away. Apparently they got into an altercation over who knows what, and the wife and mother had to break it up by threatening them both with a large kitchen knife, which the police then confiscated. But the kicker was, there were no substances or alcohol involved. My mother, who was a case manager for a while, had two interesting stories. A homeless woman who was a paranoid schizophrenic came into my mother's office with a severe infection in her foot. When my mother asked her if she thinks she's ready to be discharged, she proceeds to tell my mum that she doesn't have an infection in her foot, but that she was in fact turning into a pterodactyl. And the other one is that another man who had schizophrenia explained to my mum that the voices in his head told him to cut off his manhood and feed it to his dog. So he did that. Okay, I'm an EMT. One of my teachers told me once about the craziest call he's ever received. He's sitting at the station and he gets a call for a lacerated finger. They arrive at the house and sure enough, a woman is sitting at the table with an extremely bloody finger. They patch up the wound and head out the door, and before they get on the truck, the woman taps him on the shoulder and says, "That's not really why I called you." And he says, "Well, what's the issue, ma'am?" And she responded with, "I crap you not, I have razor blades in my hoo-ha." Apparently this woman had a sleeping disorder in which she'd sleepwalk and put stuff in her downstairs holes. Ex-Trump loyalists confess. The red flags that made people walk away. I was a conservative through my youth and mid-20s just because my family was, and everyone else around me was. I live in a red state. Unfortunately, I voted for Trump in 2016 because rather than caring that the guy was a piece of crap and credibly accused of multiple crimes and said you can just grab a woman when you want, I looked the other way because, well, I was an idiot. I was also a Christian. I didn't actively read or search out anything political. As a result, nothing I saw on social media or the local news was anything from the other side of the spectrum. To put things bluntly and simply, I just went with the herd, and I didn't care about anything outside of my bubble. The thing is though, I've always had a ton of empathy for everyone. I care a lot when bad stuff happens to people who don't deserve it. I believe all men are created equal and that racists are scum. So in the years following the election of 2016, I got so tired of all the constant hate being spewed by the side that I associated myself with. I then was introduced to Reddit, and for once I wasn't living in an echo chamber of the same hateful bullcrap that I'd always been in. And don't get me wrong, the far left can be pretty damn hateful too. I also just stopped becoming a Christian because there was just too much that I couldn't ignore about it anymore. By 2019, I'd decided that I had no political affiliation. I was certainly not conservative anymore, but I wasn't so sure that I wanted to be a Democrat either. And I still don't consider myself one. Then COVID hit, and I watched as everyone I knew started spreading all of this false rhetoric about a virus that was killing millions of people. A virus that almost killed my grandparents and accelerated my grandmother's dementia after she survived it. I watched our president refuse to do what was needed to be done to save lives and was instead too busy with golfing or telling his base that it was all a hoax and not caring about it. I got so tired of having a president that couldn't string a coherent sentence together and who couldn't act professional for 5 minutes. Republicans just kept getting worse. People in my life who were always supporters of getting vaccines, who used to call anti-vaxxers crazy, were now those very same people. They'd make fun of anyone who didn't want to get sick or wanted to protect their family or friends. It was the most vile thing I've ever seen. I knew that I no longer wanted anything to do with that. Things have only really devolved since Jan 6th. All of the blatant racism, hating people who aren't them, not wanting to care about their fellow man unless they're all white like them, praising people being ripped away from their families and given no due process. People who've always preached doing things constitutionally are now okay with its violation as long as it's something that makes them feel better. Trump brought out the worst in so many people that had hidden their hate because they knew it was unacceptable. Family of mine who I always looked up to began showing their true colors. I'm so glad that I'm no longer part of that group of people. And the funny thing is, no one in my part of the country would ever know I'm against all of their hate. I'm a big burly blue-collar diesel mechanic. I love firearms, meat, race cars, and motorcycles. I want our country to be full of diversity and all of the things that our founding fathers wanted. I believe that there's no place for racism or fascist ideals in this country. It was built by the hands of immigrants. It belongs to everyone who comes here and works the land, feeds mouth, and builds it better. I know it isn't perfect, and reform of a lot of governments is needed. But this is America. This is the land of the free. It doesn't belong to one ethnicity or religion. We should all want what's best for our fellow Americans. Yep, empathy is a pretty big reason to really not want to be part of that movement, although that's coming from your woke liberal soy boy narrator, so take that as you want. I was so disheartened when he won a second time. Because at least the first time you could just delude yourself and say that the majority of people didn't want him and it was just the electoral system or something. But then, the second time he won the popular vote as well. So at least enough people didn't care enough to show up and vote, and we've got him again. And from the unreliable newsfeed we're getting now, enough people are regretting doing that, so we'll see how things go. I remember when misspelling potato was the end of your career. I remember that one guy Howard Dean that ended his political career by yelling, "Yeah!" It was weird. My friend's husband just had his moment when he saw US soldiers on their knees rolling out the red carpet for Putin. He threw all of his MAGA crap out and said that he was done. I mean, this was act number 1024 of me thinking, okay, surely they'll see it now. How about those files that Musk has just said that the president is in? He campaigned on releasing them, and we cheered him on for it. But then he straight up called us stupid for wanting to see them after it was revealed that his name might be in them. Like, screw you, dude. Way to tell me you're the worst kind of prevert without telling me. And this video might release sometime after more developments on this front. I voted Republican for nearly my whole life, including 2016. I told a liberal friend in 2016, "What's the worst that could happen?" Oh, that terrible handling of the pandemic, all of those speeches where his scientists were dying inside because of the bullcrap he was stating, downplaying it, refusing to encourage mask use, the anti-science, anti-intellectualism, just all of it. I knew people who got really sick and lost elderly relatives, and I voted straight Dem in 2020. Then Jan 6th happened and confirmed that any redeeming qualities of the Republican Party that I grew up with were gone. I haven't voted for a Republican since, probably never will again. The party that I once believed stood for smaller government and lower taxes represents nothing but the worst of us. Bigotry, xenophobia, and fiscal irresponsibility by giving billionaires tax breaks while raising tariffs on the rest of us. Similar story to yours, except that I didn't vote for him in 2016. I was a split-ticket voter that year. I always thought he was unfit, but the depths of his evil just continue to surprise me. I grieve for the party I thought I knew. Low bureaucracy, free market, strong military. But I've got to confess that the Dems were right all along to frame Republicans as greedy, misogynistic racists. Jan 6th and the failure of the Republican Congress to impeach Trump was the death blow for me. It was my state Republicans overturning something that people voted on. I've woken up a lot here in the last couple of months. I left because I finally began fact-checking. When I watched my coworker and person I grew up with and named my son after livestream himself storming the Capitol while also watching it on the news, that's when I really woke up for real. I used to go to a church 13 years ago that I still occasionally keep tabs on via their website. The pastor and his sons were at the Capitol that day and claimed it was peaceful with the MAGAs, and it was the liberals causing a ruckus. There are people who literally lie to your face about reality, and it makes my brain explode. Presidents shouldn't have fans, only critics. They're there to do a job. Yeah, I voted for Obama twice, and so did my entire friend group. We'd openly criticize him all the time when we got together. He was a great president, especially now that the bar is set so low, but he was not perfect. Not a former MAGA myself, but my grandmother, who was fully on board as far as I knew recently, told me that she thinks the deportations make him seem kind of like, the leader of the Third Reich. Of all of the things I wished to bring them around, I was surprised and proud that it was this one. What most people don't realize is that however bad Trump is, his voters are convinced Democrats are worse. They believe every conspiracy about Democrats is gospel, and anything bad about Trump is fake. They believe that Democrats are straight up terminating little uns straight after birth, forcing gender surgery on other kids, burning flags, and trying to give all of the tax money to illegal immigrants. It doesn't matter what Trump does in real life because nothing is worse than the perceived evil on the other side done by the invisible deep state. They're so far down the figurative Democrats are the Antichrist rabbit hole that they can't recognize the literal Antichrist in front of them. My folks were never MAGA, but are Reaganite Republicans, so they held their noses and voted for him the first time. They're also terrified of and deeply hate Russia, and are very, very pro-Ukraine, and they were furious about Trump's rhetoric about it. They didn't vote for him this time around, and they hate 90% of what he's doing. As a European looking in, this is the voters that confuse me the most. There should be many old-school Republicans that rightfully hate Russia, hates the government ownership of private companies, like Intel, hate federal influence over state affairs and the deployment of the National Guard, hate authoritarianism and stuff, but they all became as meek as kittens. Where are they now? For my parents, it was the big, quote, beautiful bill that did it. My grandpa wasn't really a supporter of MAGA, but he definitely had a neutral or positive view of Trump when he first ran in 2016. Then Trump's grab her by the kitty comments went viral, and my grandpa was totally disgusted. He was adamant that no good man would speak about women like that. He hated him up until his death a couple of years back. Rest in peace, Gramps. My 93-year-old grandma's a lifelong Republican and a devout Baptist. She's disgusted by Trump and shocked that anyone could see him as a Christian or a fit leader. Sad to say that for me it didn't happen until the Jan 6th wake-up call. I just finished getting my degree from my conservative college where I voted for Trump because all of my friends and the faculty encouraged it and I didn't know any better. After Jan 6th, I really started asking myself questions about my values. I realized everything I'd been supporting was completely against what is moral and true. Growing up Mormon, my parents were pretty conservative, my father especially, and my first election to vote was 2020, and I was serving on a mission at the time, and I just sat forever trying to decide because I was passively fed so much nonsense, like that Republicans handle the economy better and stuff like that. I chose Trump, and I immediately regretted it. I remember bypassing the restrictions on my phone just to get the election updates, and when I saw Biden was going to take it, it was the biggest relief. Since returning from my mission, I've really worked hard to deconstruct all of the harmful ideology I've been taught, and doing so helped come to terms with being bisexual as well. Though I'd never have said I was in the MAGA movement, I always thought he was an awful human being, casting that vote and the instant regret really helped push me to educate myself better, and I'm so glad for it. You know what? Given the choice between someone on my own side of the aisle who just votes that way because everyone else does, and someone with the introspection to change their mind from the other side, I'll pick the considerate person with the capacity to think and change and learn from their mistakes any day of the week. My mum thought that frickin' guy was going to make things better for the working class. That he was going to be like Robin Hood and do corruption in a way that gives normal people a leg up. The illusion completely broke now. The way the administration has treated immigrants, targeted people without criminal records, men looking for work in Home Depots, and in particular the Abrigo Garcia case has caused my mum for the first time to say that Trump is evil. My mum's also about to buy a weapon for the first time. The savior of the working class who I would bet my life on has never started a lawnmower or changed a flat tire, but will save us all. Yeah, right. I find it baffling that anyone thought a rich guy with a history of ripping people off, defaulting on loans, and misdeeds against multiple women was going to make anything better for anyone but himself. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? My brother's girlfriend's mum's breaking point was the so-called Big Beautiful Bill. She was so used to Republicans failing to cut benefits for seniors that when they did, she got angry. Straight up leopards ate her face. I work for the US Postal Service. When he accused us of throwing away mail-in ballots, I was being attacked constantly by random people while trying to do my job. Cars would just pull up, roll down the window and say stuff like, "Hey, you've been throwing away ballots. How many ballots do you throw away? And if I see you throwing away ballots, I'm going to get you fired." It was unreal. I wouldn't say I was really part of the MAGA movement. I just voted for him against Hillary. I gave up on him when he lost to Biden and began his accusations. My grandma voted for him the first time and saw how awful he did and finally admitted to us that she voted for the wrong person, which I appreciated. It's hard to admit that you're wrong. And you know what? I think that's honestly the problem for a lot of them. Admitting how horrible Trump is would require them to admit to themselves and everyone else that they've been wrong this entire time. It's difficult enough for a lot of people to admit that they've been wrong about meaningless and insignificant things. But admitting that they've been so wrong about something that's become such a major part of their personality is probably close to impossible. Obviously, it's not the case for all Trumpers, or even most of them. Many of them are very aware of exactly the kind of person Trump is, and some of them love him for it. A fellow supervisor I work with is a fairly moderate individual and believed the "he isn't a politician" idea, and thought that a lot would have changed politically. He was full MAGA. The world was going to change. The US economy would boom like it never has before, blah blah blah. He bought into all of the bullcrap. And as the years passed, nothing happened. Eventually it all fell apart from there for him. He saw him as a fraud and a joke. The whining really made him look weak to my coworker. Jan 6th and all of that, and then he felt it was even worse this past election period. As far as his current position, he's still a moderate, but he's just as baffled as the rest of us anytime Trump opens his mouth. Like many here, Jan 6th. That's the day I gave up trying to support him. Up until that day, I had doubts about him and his group of people, but nothing to make me not support him. What really drove me crazy was all of the discords and groups I was in talked a lot about how America is the best and our government rules and there's nothing better. But then that election happened and suddenly it was all fake and rigged. A full 180 with no built-up or explanation. They didn't even try to coax you into it, they just suddenly went against everything they'd been saying up until that point. I couldn't wrap my head around why Mike Pence needed to be killed or arrested. To me, he did nothing wrong. It was obvious he was an scapegoat, which only turned me away from MAGA even more as they could take on a loss and had to be sore losers. I could go on about that day and what came from it, but in the end I realized they're just a bunch of cowards who can't admit that they've lost, or that they're wrong. When something doesn't go their way, they blame someone else. If something good happens, MAGA did it, and if not, MAGA didn't. That seems to be their motto. My father, a die-hard Republican, voted for Trump twice. This spring I had pregnancy complications that resulted in me hemorrhaging. I was in the ER with my father, bleeding out when the ER decided to do a D&C. When I woke up from surgery, my dad was bawling, thinking that I was going to die. He realized that if it wasn't for my state's constitution, I wouldn't have been saved. He changed his whole view on Roe v. Wade, and he's now a non-Republican registered voter in a primarily red state. Grew up in a very conservative Christian household. Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck were always on the radio. Never challenged much because that's all I knew. So I voted for Trump in 2016. The real wake-up call was COVID. Quickly started to see the holes in the narratives. Then the blatant disregard for people's health and safety. Started doing more of my own research and intentionally listening to both sides. Didn't take long to shed the propaganda. I voted independent in 2020 because I still had 25 years of anti-Democrat indoctrination at that point, and I couldn't bring myself to do it. I voted Kamala in 2024, pretty vehemently anti all of the things that this administration and the Republican Party is doing at this point. I can't say the Democratic Party is winning me over, but it's where I'm most closely aligned now. Another factor was actually my faith. I grew up Christian, but ironically, the Jesus I knew and know certainly doesn't condone any of the behaviors of the right. I still call myself a Christian, but unfortunately always have to clarify, not the MAGA Jesus kind. My prefrontal cortex developed in my late teens, and I saw it for what it was, a bunch of hateful idiots. I realized how much he was hurting the women in my life, spitting misogyny and being handsy and lecherous, never talking to any woman with respect, and trying to restrict their freedoms. I'm not an American, but I was open-minded to see how MAGA would turn out for the US. Trump, in my opinion, lost any right to be president when he made fun of that disabled reporter on live TV. If you can't show respect and dignity to people like that, you don't deserve a position of power. It wasn't any one thing, but a couple I remember was the Sharpie on the weather map thing. Also, when General Mattis left as Secretary of Defense, he tried saying some bullcrap about giving him his nickname. As a Marine, I was a big fan of General Mattis. Oh, the Sharpie thing! I'd completely forgotten about him deciding he was Poseidon and that if he drew on a map enough, it might change the course of a natural disaster. Seriously, that was a very early one of those hilarious and appalling moments when I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. What I really want to know is why Republicans in Congress are staying with him. I get politics, I'm not Mary Poppins here, but these are powerful people. Why on earth would they bother listening to this fool? We have senators openly shouting absolute nonsense. Lindsey Graham openly contradicts himself to support Trump, and none of it matters. There has to be more psychologically happening here, right? Well, Republican politicians don't want to lose their jobs next November. If they contradict him in any way, like Marjorie Taylor Greene did, he'll tell his voters not to support them. You've got to understand that most Republican politicians didn't get into this to create and push through legislation that will improve the lives of those who voted for them. They did it for the power and prestige that comes with a job, and going back to the life of a private citizen, to them at least, is a fate worse than death. Not personally a MAGA fan, but a lot of the guys in my National Guard unit were die-hard Trump supporters at the start of our last mission when the election was going on. We were in the middle of training to go to the Middle East to provide air defense for multiple countries' troops stationed across a few different bases when the election results came out. Then we got overseas and Trump started threatening to attack century-old allies, placing tariffs that destabilized the economy, and playing with the National Guard like it was his own personal police force. Most of the guys in my unit can't stand him now. Honestly, I find it hard to feel bad for the ones negatively affected, because he did exactly what he said he was going to do. In all, while the military tends to lean right, there is a lot more disgruntled troops than you'd think, and I personally don't think you'll ever see a US soldier doing anything more than standing on a sidewalk, bored while collecting a check. Hate to admit it, but I voted for him the first time round. Was surrounded by a conservative religious community who told me Hillary was a snake about to stab the nation in the back. She wanted substances in all of the kids. The Clintons were deep state. Yada yada yada. I was young and at the end of my libertarian phase, so I voted for Trump. I knew it was a huge mistake within the first couple of years. I also moved away from that community and ended up swinging center-left shortly after. Why do libertarians hate the Clintons? The Clintons seem to me to be the embodiment of libertarian ideas wrapped in a veneer of left-wing populism. They're for personal freedom and corporate laissez-faire, yet they're loathed by the very people that say they want that. The whole using troops as cops thing, definitely a breaking point for me. I was all in on MAGA until I realized in therapy that I was gay and was using MAGA as a scapegoat to cover up internalized homophobia. Many of the worst beliefs I've ever had turned out to be scapegoats to cover up internalized trauma. Our minds have scary ways of coping sometimes. About 4 months into his first presidency when I heard the "grab him by the kitty" comment. I'll admit, I was a very ignorant voter back then. I didn't do my research on what kind of man he was. The only time I ever heard Trump's name mentioned in my life was that Mac Miller song, Rest in Peace. I never knew about the atrocious stuff he did with his apartments. I figured, finally, a guy who isn't a sleazeball politician and says it like it is. It's embarrassing to admit, to be honest. My dad's wife voted for him in 2016 and now hates his guts. The turning point for her was his handling of the pandemic and the classified documents case. That one alone teed her off in addition to the rest of us who are all ex-military and take that crap seriously. It's a bad relationship. It embarrasses them, so they stay and try to justify his behavior. I don't think most of them are victims or see themselves that way. They're accomplices. The horrible things Trump does are exactly what they want. And when Trump lies, they don't see him as lying to them. He's lying for them, giving them their line of bullcrap so that they can bullcrap their friends and family into not realizing that they're in fact fascist dirtbags. Living in Canada, the pro-Trump Canadians largely got real quiet once the sovereignty threats and tariffs ramped up. Cheat codes for love. The secret marriage hacks that actually work. Verbally acknowledging each other's contributions to the household. Thanks for cleaning up after dinner. It looks great. Thanks for taking the kids to soccer practice. Thanks for grabbing groceries. This is my favorite cheese. So on and so forth. By acknowledging each other's day-to-day and sometimes mundane contributions, it builds appreciation and prevents animosity. It also prevents certain tasks from being assigned to a person with the expectation that it's theirs forever and that's just how it is. And it creates a positive feedback loop. Thank you for taking out the dog this morning, honey. Can I make you a coffee? Thank you for cooking, babe. Can I help in any way? I usually say yes, with a glass of wine and research a movie for us to watch. I've also learned that once you start saying thank you every day, saying I'm sorry becomes easier too. Both are so incredibly important. Relationships are not a zero-sum game. The only way to win is when you win together, so approach all disagreements with that approach. I read, it's not you versus your spouse, it's the two of you versus the problem, and it really changed so much of my perspective. The idea that we're a team versus everything else in life really helped me. Like, I reevaluate how I can be a better team player, I support my teammates, and I take the viewpoint that we need to work together to solve the problem. My husband and I start every day with a really long hug. It seems like a big task at first, but honestly now we go in for those hugs more than once a day, and it helped me through some really rough days. My son has watched it numerous times, and he tries to join. When I feel like my wife is feeling a little down, or when I feel like we're not connecting emotionally, I'll ask her about something she's passionate about and just get her talking. And I'll ask questions that can't be answered with a yes or no. She'll go from sitting back with her arms folded to leaning forward, talking excitedly. Often people feel closer to someone simply by talking to that person and being heard. And everyone feels good talking about their favorite things. Also, if you've got something difficult to talk about, wait until they're in a good mood. I don't know, I think sometimes shocking someone out of the blue with a hard conversation can make people a bit on edge around you. Maybe it's a good idea sometimes, but others it's probably just best to get it out the way when it feels like things can't get worse. If your significant other asks you if you want ice cream, they want ice cream. Feel free to replace ice cream with anything in this statement. Also, if you're getting food and you know your significant other likes to snack off yours, but, quote, never wants any when you order, just get a bigger size. I never want enough fries to justify getting my own portion, so my husband gets a larger size than he wants and I snack on it a bit without him getting annoyed and we're both happy. Keep a note on your phone with gift ideas. When they point out something they like or want to do, write it down in the note or snap a pic and insert it. See something that you think they'd like? Write it down. Also, keep their clothing and shoe sizes in the note as well. Also, Google mental load and learn about the imbalances that tend to occur. Take more of it on. I absolutely agree. I've got a favorites list that I keep on my phone. Anytime she says something's her favorite, big or small, it gets added. Favorite kind of coffee? Favorite flower? Favorite treat? Favorite orders from restaurants? I can remember the big common ones, but it's nice just to be able to pick something random up and I know she'll like it. Along with the obvious, make sure you're doing your share of the household duties thing, communicating your appreciation of what your partner does. Like whenever my wife returns from something like getting groceries, I go out to the car to help bring everything in and make sure I verbally let her know that I appreciate what she just did for our family. Be each other's biggest fan. No crap talking about the other to anyone, ever. When you're always looking out for and supporting each other, that creates a strong team. I had to learn this the hard way. I already hated people talking crap behind each other's backs, but my mum raised me to consider blowing off steam as something else entirely. I'd been really close with my cousin, and coffee at her place often turned into a crap-talking fest where I was trying to figure out how to handle an issue between my husband and I. And the gossiping occasionally turned into flat-out name-calling. This didn't help me with any problems. In fact, it would get me into a negative headspace and it would make things worse. I didn't realize how frickin' bad it was until she started repeating some of the things I said about my husband outside of the blowing off steam sessions. I was mad at her until I realized that it was just a cover because I was so embarrassed about what I did. My skin still tries to crawl off when I think about it, and it was 20 years ago. I never did it again. I explained to her that I needed to stop. I apologized to my husband. It was hard, but I saw the benefits almost immediately. I'd talk to him about problems instead of letting them build up. I had more respect for him, and I felt our relationship was something worthy of protection. I had to back off the close relationship with my cousin, as she really enjoyed drama, and without me providing that, she had no use for me beyond trying to stir crap up. Pick the right person. Be super critical during the courting phase. Ask the tough questions and make sure you're aligned. But once you decide to commit, that critical switch needs to flip, and you need to be their biggest cheerleader. So many couples do it the other way. Lovey-dovey during the courting phase, and then they start getting critical after they commit. First, you and your partner are a team that are working to solve your issues together. It's you two versus the issue and never you versus your partner. And two, it's hardly a cheat code, but communication is key. Never stop dating your partner. Kiss often. If it got them to marry you, why would they want you to stop? She made it pretty clear that's what they want you to do. You never get yelled at while vacuuming. My father always told me that most married murder victims were killed by their spouse, but never while doing the dishes. Never leave the house without a kiss, even if it's just a peck on the cheek. I'm hijacking this. I gave my dad an I love you and a hug the morning when he left for work, and he didn't make it home. Motorcycle wreck. I was 12 and that was 16 years ago now. I still think about it weekly. Not marriage, but it worked in a long-term relationship for me. I make notes in my girlfriend's contact in my phone. What she orders at certain restaurants, things from her past that were important, stuff she's mentioned wanting for Christmas and holidays. Any issue we have is caused by our old roommate. We rented out a room in our house to a friend before we decided to have kids. Anyway, the friend, let's call him Henry, cool guy. Real bad roommate. Henry's long gone now, but we still blame things on him. Henry said he was going to mow the lawn. Well, Henry left crumbs all over the counter again. And my personal favorite, I really wish Henry would stop leaving his makeup all over the bathroom counter. We laugh about it a little and then nobody feels called out. It works like a charm for us. 15 years in, pick your battles. Don't get into an argument about something you couldn't care less about. In fact, if there is a disagreement, don't think about it like who's right or wrong. Think about like who cares about this topic the most, and if it's them, get out of their way. Your wife is still your girlfriend. Never lose that mentality. My brother says he finds a lot of success by doing things around the house before she can even ask. She'll be like, "Can you take out the trash?" And he'll be like, "I already did it." He used to do this to my mum too when we were younger. This was my advice to my teenage boy-next-door neighbor. He just wanted to go to a party that weekend and was going to ask his mum, and I just said, "Nope, just go in and do the dishes. Ask her if anything else needs to be done, then go to bed and ask her tomorrow." And he got to go. That is some world-class advice, and he might have permanently changed the trajectory of that young man's life. Man here. I make the bacon. Literally, I fry up enough pretty bacon so that she can steal a couple of strips and I can yell, "Get out of my kitchen!" before I put everything else on the plate for breakfast. She's hard as nails for the rest of the time, but the wife giggles and runs off like a child caught with her hand in the cookie jar when I'm making the sides for the pancakes and blueberry waffles. Made from scratch, mind you. Did you come here just to brag about your sweet breakfast skills? Because that's what it looks like, pal. And now I have to write the rest of this script while dreaming about waffles. I hope you're happy, because I'm not. Just because flowers. Not flowers because you're sorry or it's some holiday, just because. They always mean more to your significant other when there isn't a reason. My partner hates flowers, like they get angry at me for buying them. So I get them just because supplies for their hobbies. That did the trick. Don't think of it as a 50-50 sort of relationship, your half and my turn. Think of it as 100% and 100%. Each partner giving the other their all without expectation of equal return. During pregnancy and the first few months after childbirth, I always hear men say, "There isn't much for me to do with the kid, it's all her." My cheat code is that she is your responsibility during that time. Every time her belly itches, you put lotion on. You get up and get her snacks. You rub her feet. You lift her belly up to release the pressure on her back. You buy her comfortable clothes. When the baby's born, yeah, she has to wake up and feed it, but you burp the baby, you change the diapers when you can. I did all of this while being active duty military, so it drives me up a wall when fathers and husbands make the excuse that they have to work, so they can't help out. Be an active parent and an active partner. Suddenly you'll find yourself getting way more action in the bedroom too without begging. It's like genuinely caring is attractive or something. Feed them or let them wake up before getting too defensive in any argument. Hangry and tired people are not themselves, and it might not be a fight in a normal state of mind. This goes both ways and across all spectrums. Love is an action verb. Small affirmations aren't small to the person hearing it. When my wife gets home and wants to talk about work or a friend or whatever, I ask if she wants support or suggestion, and it changed my life. My wife de-stresses after work by talking about her day. When we were dating, my impulse would be to solve whatever problem she had, which she didn't want. Years together and many fights later, we've both learned to just ask what the other needs. And we both love each other, so we're happy to provide it. Being kind is better than being right. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Separate bed covers. Yep, having our own blankets is a game changer. Just get 2 matching duvet covers and then each person can pick their blanket of choice. No fighting about who's a blanket hog or one person thinking a blanket is too thick or thin. We've done this for our whole relationship. 12 years together, married 8 years in October, and I swear by it. Do not take your complaints about that person outside of the marriage just to vent or gossip. I'm not talking about ignoring if you're being mistreated, I'm talking about the stress and irritation that can come with daily living in regards to your spouse and longing to vent about it. I might say that finances, schedule, and time are really stressful and complain to family or my friends about that, but complaining about circumstances and not my spouse. But I don't talk about my husband for the sake of venting or gossip or tear him down in conversations to other people. If I needed true assistance, I'd find a therapist. I find allowing yourself to wallow in gossip and disrespect for your spouse quickly colors your view and other people's view of them, and you can't easily get that respect back. If my husband does something that I view as foolish, I address it with him. We've been married almost 20 years, and mutual respect and admiration are very important in our marriage. Don't be defensive, it's okay to be wrong. An old man who was married 50 years told me to end the night with, "Thank you for being my wife." Totally works 15 years in. I added replace furnace filter to my Google Calendar as code for keeping track of my wife's period. Having her favorite snack already in hand has kept a lot of peace in our house. Telling her you'll never believe where I'm taking you to eat. Then on her first guess, just say, "Yep." Oh no, now I'm committed to a 3 Michelin star restaurant with no reservations available. Put your ego aside and pursue peace. Buy them tacos and call them pretty or handsome. It works. Remember, it's not you versus them, it's both of you versus the problem, your teammates. Also, all of the other advice here. When you're wrong, apologize. When you're right, say nothing. Ask your partner their least favorite chore. That is your chore now. Small things that seem weirdly important to them and silly to you, just do them. And when something that might seem small to them bothers you, communicate it to them. Oh, I've discovered something dynamite that works wonders. The first month after we kissed, I bought her small gifts and made a card. Our 1-month anniversary. She thought it was a little cheesy, but sweet. The next month, same again. The next month, and so forth. A card with some heartfelt thoughts and some small gifts. Often late, but I always catch up. Kept going after we got married and had kids. We had our 103rd month anniversary a few days ago. I get away with absolute murder, by the way. She's kept all of the cards, and I'll do this forever. Scheduling doing the deed while also being open to spontaneity. Being a nice, respectful person. It sounds simple because it is, but very difficult when you have kids, stress, emotions, trauma, and when the other person has the same. If you can stay nice and respectful in difficult circumstances, you'll do better than most. Don't keep score, and absolutely don't bring up score. Don't empty the dishwasher because it would give you brownie points. Do it because it needs to be done. Always say thank you for meals, regardless of how it turns out. You're thanking the effort, not the outcome. Rock, paper, scissors, and veto, and do not misuse it or it will end badly. If there's a favor you want done, offer rock, paper, scissors. Turns the act of the favor into a game. But before playing, your partner can veto. The balance comes from the fact that you can also veto when they ask you, so you both have to pick and choose when to veto. If rock, paper, scissors is played, it must be followed. You have to do the thing. So say you want a drink from the kitchen and nobody's getting up soon. You lose rock, paper, scissors. You have to get up and get your drink as soon as the game is complete. Tea time. You know how all smokers stand around each other when they smoke? It's a relaxing activity conducive to communication. It opens the lips, so to speak. Obviously, smoking is bad for you, but you can substitute it with tea time. Offer to make each other tea or coffee. Make it a ritual understanding that's low-key chat, but not talk time. Eventually, you become conditioned to comfortable communication during tea time, and as a bonus, it's also a gift and act of service that makes one feel loved. In my family, tea time is just when everyone tries to guilt-trip everyone else into making the cup of tea and talks about how they made it last time. It happens about every other hour or so. I think the amount of time I'd spend doing it if I offered would be appalling. It's a nice idea for a couple situation, though. Be goofy with each other. Let the weird out. Oh, this is a real one that works wonders. Join Pinterest and subscribe to your significant other's Pinterest site. Then proceed to buy gifts for them that they've chosen years ago as their favorite items, and you'll have a significant other that's amazed by your gift-giving abilities. This is more of an unethical cheat code, but pick battles to lose. My wife doesn't want me to ride a motorcycle. I have zero interest in ever riding one, but I bring it up every now and then just so she can shoot it down. After 17 years, my wife called me out on it this spring, saying that I didn't want one anyways. You have to respect each other, which is a two-way street, but still. The death of relationships is when you stop trying to understand a partner and just have contempt for them. Sometimes that's okay. You didn't need to understand an ex who clearly treated you horribly, for example. But more often, people get to a point where they stop seeing their partner as a person they want to help, who they have sympathy for, and see the good faith actor, and they start seeing them as someone they need to get revenge on or force into compliance. When you see yourself getting contemptuous, ask yourself if there's something more you can understand. Remember who this person is to you and what you love about them, and consider that they might have acted out of emotion or ignorance when they said or did something that hurt you. I mean, don't be a doormat, but people often get into fights when they could work together or understand the other person. Also, don't start off bad. If you can never respect a woman who does X, or you're with a man who can't respect you because you do X, don't get married. You should both be going south of the border on each other more. Share in her outrage. When she calls and tells you something crazy happened and she's annoyed at a person or situation, never respond with logic. Always respond with, "Are you fricking kidding me? That butthole did what?" Or, "I'm going to come down there myself and deal with this." Or something similar that fits the situation. They don't want answers or solutions, they just want you to share in their outrage. Race the microwave. Anytime you use it, use that time to do something quickly. Load the dishwasher, flip the laundry, tidy up, get the garbage or recycling ready. You'll be surprised at what you can do in 2 minutes. If your wife is out all day and you want to be a degenerate and play video games for 10 hours, do 15 minutes of housework during the day and she'll come home and be happy you were productive. Marriage is easy, life is hard. It is vital not to mix the two of them up. If you get a snack, you bring them home a snack too, especially from gas stations. It's the law. Never underestimate the power of a little treat. You're getting gas? Go get her a little treat. Groceries? Little treat. Wood for your honeydew project? Little treat. Always offer to do the little things. You're going to the store? Ask if she needs you to pick anything up. Making yourself a cup of coffee? Ask if she wants one. Running to the kitchen? Offer to bring back a snack. Always work out your arguments before going to bed. Remember that even when you disagree, you're in this together, so work on your disagreements together, trying to figure out what's causing the disconnect without raising your voice. Never keep score. For bills, for expenses, for income, and for chores, if you see a task that needs doing, do it. Kiss frequently, but also do things like kiss the back of their neck as you pass. Don't make it super raunchy, like you're not trying to pinch her butt or something every time you see her unless she wants that. Just a little quick thing to show her you love her. My partner and I have just passed 10 years. Paying for a house cleaner to clean the house twice a month was the best investment ever. We just have different definitions of what clean is. We've argued a lot over it over the first year or two. $120 on cleaning and literally never an argument about it since. They wash floors, vacuum, dust, clean bathrooms top to bottom, clean sinks and counters. It's worth every penny. You still have to pick up before the cleaners come, but that's nothing in comparison. Actually listening to your partner, and actually liking them as a friend and person. Called a florist to buy flowers for our anniversary. They called me the next year to ask if I wanted them to send flowers again. Hell yes, and thank you for the reminder. They put my card on file, and I gave them all of my important dates, and these days they just ring me up to confirm, and I don't have to remember anything. Communication, communication, communication. I've been married 5 years, we've been together for 8. I stress hard on this. Quality communication from both sides makes such an effective team. The fights, arguments, tough spots, financial stress, intimate problems that we've completely avoided and been able to navigate together solely because we focus on communicating. That's it. They want to be heard and validated, and so do you. And who doesn't love a good old debate when you come to a crossroads with a decision? Life is so easy as a married couple when we sorted out our communication. You're a team of 2, trying to find the best way to solve the problem in front of you. You're not one person in a sparring match against another person. Saying "I'm sorry" and meaning it. Make her laugh as much as possible. If you can't figure out what you did wrong or what's upsetting your partner, get them a snack. Often people get cranky when they haven't eaten, but they don't notice. Plus, everyone likes a snack. I'm a lesbian, but I'll leave this cheat code for men. Toys are teammates, not competition. Close call. My scariest near-death experience ever. I have a heart problem, arrhythmia. It's a small deformity in my heart that starts pounding too fast whenever I make too much effort. Sometimes I'd get small heart attacks, but we never cared much because they were small and they went away as fast as they came. Someday, though, I woke up at 5 a.m. with my heart racing again, and I told my mum. Since it had happened before, she told me to go back to sleep and that it would stop. It did, but that's not where this ends. She took me to school at 7 a.m., and the moment I stepped in class, my heart started pounding fast again. I asked my first class teacher to go to the infirmary. I spent 2 hours in there while they checked up everything, and they decided to take me to the hospital. My mum had just laid down to sleep when they called her, which resulted in her rushing to the school with her pajamas on. My heart did not stop racing at any time. They took me and my pajama mum to the hospital by bus, and I stayed there until 2 p.m., with a few tubes attached to me, and my heart was beating about more than 200 times per minute, as far as I remember. Me and my mum lived with my grandma, so if she knew what was going on, she'd have a heart attack herself and die. So we didn't tell her the situation until it was all over. Nowadays, I have to take pills every night to prevent heart attacks. Once I turn 18, I'll have to get surgery to remove the deformity so I can live a normal life, and frankly, I can't wait. While undocking a houseboat, the rope we used got wrapped around my leg, and I started getting dragged down the riverbank. I was saved by some random plank of wood being nailed into the side of the bank. I was able to put my good foot on that and take off my rope foot shoe, letting me slide the rope off. If that plank hadn't been there, I would have fallen in and been dragged downriver by my foot. A guy tried to abduct me when I was 9. The thought of what he might have done to me still freaks me out. I suffered attempted abductions at 5 and again at 11. It's definitely some freaky stuff. Wait, the fact that you almost got kidnapped twice makes me feel like I'm due to get kidnapped any day now. Yeah, I was about to say, the odds of that happening twice to the same person are a bit off. Is there a normal number of expected kidnapping attempts in your average lifetime? because I'm probably overdue. I'm glad the people in this story got off okay, though. I was once the middle car in a car accident sandwich. Then I turned down a job end of August 2001 that was on the floor the first plane crashed into on September 11th. Then I got shot in the head from across a field when I was at a park with friends. I'm seriously living on bonus time. When I was about 2, my aunt fed me pistachios. What nobody knew was that I was deathly allergic to tree nuts. My mum had put me to sleep because she thought the rash starting to form under my mouth was a pacifier rash. She woke up to me crying. I could barely breathe and was rushed to the hospital. The doctor said if my mum had brought me to the hospital any later, I would have died. So yeah, that's how I found out I was allergic to tree nuts. My tonsils tried to kill me when I was a teenager. It started with the worst sore throat you can imagine, and then progressed to feeling so fatigued that I had trouble walking. I'd wake up in the middle of the night drenched in sweat, literally like someone threw a bucket of water on me, and shaking terribly. As it progressed, I had vivid hallucinations and threw up all night. I felt immediately better after the tonsils were removed, but I lost 20 or 30 pounds and my hair started falling out after I recovered. A doctor told me it was because when you're that sick, your body shuts down non-essential functions like growing hair. I looked a little funny when it started growing back. I sat next to this girl in class who came in looking deathly as frick. Apparently it was tonsillitis, but she looked awful. A couple of days later, she passed away. Scary to me that I saw her, in a way, dying. To this day, I believe that she must have been misdiagnosed, but your experience seems to indicate that death by tonsillitis is possible. I almost died because of being stupid. When I was 4, I played with a broom, tripped and rammed the broomstick in my mouth and up my throat. Almost choked on it, and I think it was my father who saved me because the emergency doctor told my parents to not move that frickin' thing, but my father just ripped it out of my throat and mouth in a panic. It didn't hurt, but I think it was just because of the shock and the fear of suffocating. Afterwards, I had horrible pain and I couldn't swallow for 2 weeks. I was playing on ice with a really fat friend of mine. I was 9. We knew we weren't allowed to play there because it's really dangerous, but we still did. Anyway, that friend was an utter idiot. He just started smashing the ice with a hammer to make holes for the ducks or something, and then of course the ice broke and he fell into the water. He was so heavy that every time he tried to get back on the ice, it would break. At some point, he got stuck beneath the ice. I'm this really lanky, thin, 9-year-old girl, so pulling him up in general was difficult. No one else besides me and 2 friends who were just yelling and screaming from the side of the river were there. So my dumb idiot self decides to grab the hammer and I start smashing that ice so it breaks. Then I attempted to pull him back on the ice, but of course he was so heavy that he pulled me half in under the water as well. After about 10 minutes of both of us half drowning in the ice water, I managed to pull him onto the land. He didn't even thank me and ran off crying to his own house. I just waited till my clothes were dry and never told my family anything had happened. The next day at school, my mum heard my friend had to go to the hospital because of hypothermia. I pretended not to know why. Lesson learned. Don't try to break the ice for the ducks without adult supervision, and not while you're on that ice. When I was 8 years old, a chandelier almost fell on top of me in my living room. I was watching a movie, Lilo and Stitch, when I heard a crack, looked up, and the huge chandelier was about to fall on top of me. I rolled off the couch and it barely missed me. I still had tons of cuts from all the glass, though, just not a direct hit. I worked at a pet store and I was in my 20s. My friend and I were in charge of ordering marine fish since we were both crazy about aquariums and all things salt water. We received a bunch of coral and live rock. We were handling it and moving it around, putting it into the tanks, and after I set one down, a particularly amazing piece that I'd been looking at closely, a blue-ringed octopus crawled out and nearly latched onto me. We both knew exactly what it was, and we just looked at each other, speechless. A few years ago, I was staying at a stranger's home in the western US. It was a situation like an Airbnb, but a different company. I actually slept in a camper outside of the main house, but I could use the kitchen and the bathroom inside. At one point, they offered to let me sleep inside. They had an extra bedroom in there. I just enjoy sleeping out, so I declined. That night, there was a gas leak in the house and the entire family passed away. I actually knocked on the door that morning and had to leave because nobody would let me in. That night, the police were there and told me to leave. I've done a lot of really dangerous things in my life, but I think this is the event that most haunts me. In short, I declined an indoor bedroom in favor of sleeping outside. Whole family there died of a gas leak that night. As a 20-year-old American, I was riding a motorcycle across Vietnam like the Top Gear special. I stupidly decided that riding on Highway 1, the main trucking highway from Ho Chi Minh City to Hanoi, at night, in the rain, was a good idea. At one point I was riding and I could see two headlights in the oncoming lane blinding me with their high beams. Then all of a sudden, the two highlights turned into four as a bus was passing the truck coming head-on at me. I tried my best to swerve off onto the shoulder, but I was being blinded by both their high beams, and I had rain hitting my eyes. I ended up getting to the side just enough, and the bus probably came about an inch from hitting me head-on. I don't know why the universe wants me dead, but here are two of mine. I've got an arrhythmia, and I've had it since I was at least 11. Basically, my heart messes up and misses a beat, then overcorrects and goes into tachycardia. I faint constantly, and I'm extraordinarily bad at a lot of cardio, but I love running anyway. When I was 13, I hadn't yet been diagnosed. I ran track and had been doing so for about 3 years. Sprints and jumps. My coach wanted me to try the mile at a meet, and I agreed to try it out. At the meet, I wasn't able to finish because my chest pain got so bad. That night, I wasn't able to breathe well, and I felt like my chest was simultaneously exploding and being crushed. My mum said it must be an asthma attack, which I hadn't been before, and I was up all night. Actually, that was my first cardiac event, so a mild heart attack at 13. Struggling to breathe, terrified, and in intense pain. Before that, when I was very young, my aunt was watching me as I played outside in the rain. It was stormy. All I remember is running around and then waking up super tingly on the ground, like my whole body had fallen asleep. Either I or the ground next to me had been hit by lightning. My aunt panicked and still hasn't ever told my mum or dad, and I never have either. I wonder if that first one had anything to do with the second one. You know, I think that's the kind of thing you hold over your aunt just in case you need a favor in the future. Or make a fun family announcement once you've had the operation to fix the arrhythmia. Or do some people not end up taking that operation? Arrhythmia aficionados, let me know in the comments. Oh boy, this one still haunts me. So my friend invited me to their house and we were just chilling when he asked me if I wanted to see his snake. I was like, yeah, sure, because 9-year-old me thought that snakes were cool and edgy. He takes me out to his shed and there's a maybe 50 by 50 centimeter and meter deep plastic container. I knew pretty much nothing about snakes, being 9 and very, very into sharks and the ocean. So he hands me this plastic container with holes poked in the top and tells me his snake is in it. I hesitantly pull off the top because the only other person I know who has a snake has a proper home for it, not a plastic box in a shed. And even then I was weary. I opened it and a really frickin' mad eastern diamondback rattlesnake jumps out at me and I get bit on my left shoulder. The kid runs inside and calls an ambulance while I sit there in agony and the snake slithers away. I got the anti-venom I needed and his mother confirmed she never bought a snake for him, and to this day I have no clue how he managed to trap one in a plastic box and keep it in his shed. After the hospital trip and a really awkward explanation to my mum, he was kind of forced out of my life. I almost drowned in a deep, crowded wave pool at a water park when I was a small child. When I was 3 years old, a boy pressed my head into the sand and sat on it. My mum saw it and saved me, and now I have claustrophobia. I think I was being mean to that kid or I took his toy or something. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I sat down on a bench to have a smoke after asking a friend who'd hooked up with a random person if it was okay if I got the first taxi as I was on my own. The first taxi spotted, those two jumped in and left me after a night out. Boyfriend troubles at the time, so stupid me thought it was sensible to just walk into a park and sit on a seat just to contemplate whether he was worth staying with. Random guy came and tried to talk to me. I got a weird vibe as he wouldn't take no for an answer. Then he started hitting me, throttling me, and dragged me into the bushes. I had a weird out-of-body experience, so guessed I was dying. I hadn't realized I'd been screaming the whole time. People in houses nearby heard me and phoned the police. A group of 5 random men heard me as they were coming home and pulled him off me. He tells them I was his girlfriend and we were having a fight. I told them I've never seen him before. He tries to run and they accidentally trip him many times. The police arrive, I end up undressed in the police station, taking my clothes off for evidence and getting photographed, and then the coroner's office the next day after the police took me back to the scene to collect stuff that had fallen out of my pockets during the struggle. I was told by the extent of petechiae from the throttling that I was 20 seconds away from death. Those guys were given £100 reward each for public service, but a couple of them couldn't collect as they had some sort of outstanding police warrant, which was a shame. They deserved that reward. Always tease me off watching movies where people are strangled. I looked like a beetroot after that experience. My entire face was purple with burst blood vessels, my eyes were completely bloodshot, bruised finger marks all over my neck. He was a newly married naval officer with a 9-month-old child. He got dishonorably discharged, lost his pension, and got sent to Colchester, the armed forces prison in the UK. I had to sit with him and his family while waiting to go into the courtroom. The only time I've fainted in my life was in the witness box. It messed up my A-levels. I really don't think I'd like to go through with that again. I had a stint in college where I was in a really bad place and my drink got extremely out of hand with it. Every time I drank, I'd wake up the next morning next to a pile of throw-up by my bed with no recollection of doing so. Eventually, I just habitually left a bucket there. One morning I woke up and my mouth was full of it, and it had clearly been in my mouth for a long time, as I'd gotten so drunk that I didn't even roll over or wake up. I have no clue how I didn't choke on it and suffocate in my sleep, but I stopped drinking for quite a while after that. I watched one of my friends get shot in the leg because he said, and I quote, "Yeah, I can take a bullet." And someone said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Frickin' shoot me then." And he bled a lot. I'm not sure if it was close to death, but it certainly qualifies as a horrible death. I went cycling with a friend of mine and it started raining, so the road became slippery as all heck. We hit the pedals even harder to escape from the rain as we were only a few minutes away from home, and in a not even that sharp corner, I just slipped as I slid on the wet tarmac. I saw a semi-truck rolling towards me and thought, well, that's it. As we passed each other, we missed by maybe a few centimeters. My friend told me after he came to check on me that he thought it was over and only a miracle saved me that day. In 2017, I almost drowned to death. It's the worst way to die in my humble opinion. The helpless feeling was terrible. 1 minute I was full panic mode, trying to breathe, but every breath was just water. I felt like I was burning. Then, it didn't feel peaceful, but it felt like I was ready. The whole thing that says, you see all of your memories before dying is absolutely true. I've just had this bad feeling knowing that my parents wouldn't have seen me grow up, and that I couldn't see my friends anymore. I suddenly heard a loud sound like a bzzzt, and everything went blank. Somehow, someone saw me and saved me. The bad thing is that I've had to cope with depression since then. I'm better nowadays, but the helpless feeling just never left me after I almost drowned. One thing I've never said to anyone is that I saw an elf while drowning. I know, it's weird as heck, but I think it was just my mind making up stuff from the lack of oxygen. I jumped over a rail at Pier 33 near Fisherman's Wharf at night and landed in the bay underneath the pier. It was disgusting, but all of my friends helped me get out. Went by the same area during the day later on to discover that I'd missed several iron spikes sticking out of the wood where I dove in. Haha, yeah, I've done what I thought was a really cool jump off a high cliff into some water before, landed in deep water, and then when I tried to swim back I realized that there was knee-depth rock in basically every direction I swam, and that I'd basically lucked out and landed in the one place that wouldn't kill or cripple me. Not smart. Don't dive at night, folks. Sometime in 2011, I was out running early in the morning and suddenly I got a headache. I didn't think much of it and I just cut my run short. When I got back from work, my wife expressed concern that I'd had a headache all day and asked me to go to sick call in the morning if I still had it. I was in the military at the time. The next day, I went to sick call and managed to get the one doctor to ever read my file. She said it was strange that in the 6 years I'd been enlisted that I'd only been to sick call once, and that had led to surgery. She said I should go get a CAT scan to be on the safe side, and I had no objections. My wife insisted on coming, even though I tried to explain that it was most likely nothing to be worried about. We get to the other hospital, I had the scan done, and we get placed in a waiting room. As I'm waiting, a nurse brings me a pill cocktail to help with the pain. Up until this point, I hadn't taken anything. I've never liked taking pills as I have a very low tolerance to most things and they tend to make me feel strange. I was about to accept this pill when another nurse just about dives through the curtain and slaps the cup out of the other nurse's hand while shouting, "No!" Turns out, my brain was bleeding, and the medication I was about to take would have made it so much worse. Less than 20 minutes later, I was strapped to a board and driven to the nearest naval hospital, where I was knocked out and given a tube that ran from my leg into my head. The doctor who was there when I woke up had been chatting with my wife. Apparently, if the sick call doctor hadn't decided something was a little weird, it was likely I would have died. If the nurse had let me take that medication, it was likely I would have died. If I'd taken anything for my headache the first day, it was likely I would have died. As it is, I was ambulatory after about a month and able to go home at around 7 weeks. I was lethargic and unable to perform anything other than light duty that involved a lot of sitting down for about a year after, and of course, that was the end of my military career. After about a year, I started to get back my energy again, and once that started, it only really took about a month to get back to where I was prior to the bleed. But it was a little troubling just how many normal things that could have happened that day that would have killed me. Silver linings though, as far as the doctors can tell, I escaped without any long-term effects, and the neurologist has told me that I'm almost certainly going to have another one, and that one is likely to end me. No idea when that will happen, but I'm assured it will be painless. Knowing this has allowed me to pursue a lot of hobbies that I once thought were too dangerous. It just seems that knowing how it's likely to end makes me feel like it's unlikely to end any other way. In short, had a brain bleed, several mundane decisions over the next 2 days saved my life. I was living in Africa at the time. I was staying with a family native to that country, but they were connected with the group I was with. You know, to get the real way of living over there. Anyway, every house was gated off with 12-foot gates and fences around their properties. I'd come home one evening. Later, like 2 a.m., I'd been picking up a friend from the airport. I entered through the gate door. I had a key, obviously. The walk from the gate to the fence door is about 100 feet, 33 yards or 30.5 meters. Well, they have guard dogs. At first, those things just bark to let the homeowner know that someone's there. Now, mind you, I'd only lived there for like 3 weeks, so they knew me, but not well. I started walking slowly. The dogs were getting more aggressive with their barks. I know from early childhood not to run, not to show fear, and keep slowly walking. Keep my hands up. I'm about halfway at this point. They're now starting to sniff and bite at my pant legs. After walking what felt like a full-on American football field length away, I finally reached my door. It was locked, of course. They're getting very aggressive, and I'm like, is this how I die? To dogs eating me in Africa? I fumbled my keys around and tried not to drop them. Unlocked the door and get inside. I did not sleep. I was so happy just to be breathing and alive. In 2006, when I was 7 years old, I went over to the park with my older brother. He would have been about 9. Back then, he had a bit of an obsession with those for sale signs, and if he found them dumped anywhere, he'd bring them back home. We found one, but it had some concrete at the end of the wooden pole, and we couldn't pick it up. Keep in mind that this was just down the hill from our house, literally not even a minute away. I didn't want to go and get my mum by myself, but I didn't want to stay alone with the sign either. We argued, and he ran up the hill and across the quiet road to get our mum. Another thing to keep in mind is that we lived on a council estate in the UK, so this was hardly a road that saw tons of traffic, and the speed limit was 30 miles per hour. That's about 48 kilometers per hour for our American listeners. I followed him and didn't stop before crossing the road. I just ran right out, right into the side of a 7-seater estate car. My leg got lodged by the tire, and the car ran my leg over before flinging me back onto the pavement. I ended up with multiple open fractures in my leg and needed a few surgeries to fix it. My tibia and fibula bones in my right leg actually ended up fusing together during the healing process, and the doctors decided this wasn't going to cause any harm. Luck was definitely on my side that day. Had I been a few seconds faster, I would have run right in front of that car, and I was a teeny tiny 7-year-old. No way that I would have survived, even despite the fact that the driver was going just under the speed limit. It also just so happened that I was wearing some thick jeans and brown faux leather cowboy boots. This was in the early 2000s. The docs had to cut the boots and jeans off my body, and it turns out the damage would have been a lot more severe if I'd been wearing less clothing. In short, got hit by a car as a child. Cringy 2000s show style pretty much saved my leg. Karen alert! I survived the most nightmare customer of my life. I worked in Domino's. I had a guy throw a handful of pennies at me while laughing. The 30-odd cents was my tip. He was mad when I turned around and walked away without picking any of them up. His exact words were, "Oh, my money's not good enough for you? Fine. I'll never order Domino's again." I've never had a customer fire themselves like that before. It was great. I love when the "I'll never come back" threat comes out. Like, you think my salary is at all affected by you not coming in? Please never come back. It's one less person to yell at me. I used to work in a bar that sold very old booze. A drunk man tried to impress his friends by chugging from a bottle of Amaro from the early 60s. He had to pay for the whole thing since his lips touched it and it was useless. Cost him around $800. Barista here. Had a guy that regularly came in and ordered a complicated drink. He always finished the order by asking for a finger swirl in the drink. If you gave him a confused look, he'd say, "Well, how else am I going to taste you?"
Yeah, he was the worst. Oh my god, I had a similar guy when I was in college. He said for me to stick my finger into the beer bottle so he could taste something sweet. Ugh. Worked in a popular restaurant for a while. We usually have quite a long wait time, like 30 to 40 minute waits, during dinner service, and people are told by the hosts about this. There was this lady that got fed up with the wait after 10 minutes. She stormed into the restaurant, stood next to a table of 4 people, and literally asked them, "Are you guys done? We've been waiting for a long time now, and I'd like to have the table if you guys are just chatting." I was completely mind-blown how people are able to not give an F and pull something like this in public. This one guy threw a beer in my face when I stuck up for myself by telling him to stop banging his fists on the bar and screaming, "Yo!" to get my attention. I had a guy literally spit on me for the same reason. I was working at one of the busiest bars in a major city in the Midwest, and this F-stick couldn't stop pounding his empty glass on the bar, rolling his eyes and yelling, "I'm empty over here." It was 11 on a Saturday night and the bar was packed, literally a line around the block. I told him I'd get to him as quickly as I could, and not 20 seconds later, I hear him slamming one of my frickin' glasses on the bar again. I lean over the bar to tell him if he can't stop bashing my glassware, I'm going to give him a plastic cup. The D-bag proceeds to spit in my frickin' face. I was honestly shocked. One of my regulars grabbed him by the back of his head and slammed his face into the bar. Fight breaks out, and at least 20 of my glasses ended up broken. Ugh. Well, I don't condone violence, but I'm not at all sorry that the guy had his mug impact the bar with prejudice, because that's a classic story of F around and find out. What a dillweed. Way back in the 80s, I worked in a restaurant that was a favorite of a celebrity chef of those days, Jeff Smith, the frugal gourmet. I've never seen a bigger butthead than that guy. Literally made our servers cry. Nothing was ever right. He was beyond rude and condescending, yet he kept coming back. He had a reputation for being a jerk off camera as well. Eventually, he was disgraced by being outed as an unspeakable act offender of the worst kind and was quickly forgotten by all. Our restaurant was a good place. Another celebrity chef of the time, Graham Kerr, the galloping gourmet, was always a pleasure to have visit. One guy would come into the cafe with his 2 crappy dogs that would hop on everything and bark at people. Even if there was a line, he'd just raise his hand and yell, "Coffee!" and just walk past the line and wait for his coffee, where he'd pay cash at the pickup area. One day, after he skipped a particularly long line, I refused to make his coffee for him. He started shouting at me and saying he'd get me fired, but eventually he went to the end of the line and had to order his coffee like everyone else. Nobody clapped, but I felt like the people in line were clapping in their hearts. Our bar was having a private party. Drunk guy walks in and orders a drink. I knew he wasn't with the party based on his attire and the fact that he came in every so often. I told him he couldn't get a drink, and he lost his mind. He told me to F off, and then he wanted to fight me. On his way out, he yelled that we should put up signs as he walked by the signs on the door saying that we were closed for a private event. He came in the next day sober and apologized. I work in a place that's frequented by local families and youth sports teams. I'm not a server, I'm a cook who happens to take orders, pour beer, run food, clear tables, and do dishes. But primarily, I cook. On Sundays, this one large group of people always comes in, and they are the worst. The parents drink and ignore their preteens who run around playing games in the entire restaurant, disrupting everybody else. They've tried to walk in parties of 45 during end-of-year sports party season when we're booked solid, and then get angry that there isn't enough space for them. And they modify everything like crazy and leave 0 in tips. It's at least once a month the entire group comes in, and weekly for some of the individual families. After a wedding reception ended at our facility, we were cleaning and I began the cleaning process on our espresso machine. The party was almost over, a half hour already. The process takes 12 minutes. People were still there as the party slowly let out, and the father of the bride asks me for an espresso. I told him I could get it to him, as we have a strict policy of always trying to satisfy a guest's needs, but the machine was cleaning and it would be done in about 10 minutes. He begins ranting about how much he paid for the wedding and stormed out to our banquets manager and told them that I refused to make it for him. The manager is a D-bag and starts ripping me in front of the guy. I show both of them that the machine has just finished the cleaning process and it was impossible to make it beforehand, and I got suspended for 2 weeks. Used to be a bartender at this hybrid restaurant, bar, movie theater. On big movie releases, the bar would get absolutely slammed, and on this particular night we'd run out of glassware completely. People were allowed to take their drinks into the theater with them. The only glassware I had at the time were regular pint glasses that you'd normally serve water in. We only served beer in them in a real pinch. This one guy and his wife got lucky and caught a seat at the bar, and he ordered a Jack Daniel's neat. Having no other glassware, I put it in a pint glass and explained that we were running low on rocks glasses. Assuming that he'd understand since it was absolute chaos everywhere you looked, he took it and said, "I'm not very happy," in a smarmy way and gave this little crap-eating grin. I apologized him and said, "Well, unfortunately we're not making any more glasses back here." And he and his wife acted like I'd reached across the bar and slapped him. I just got my manager and told him to deal with them, and he told them the same thing I'd told them regarding the lack of glassware, and gave them a free drink, which they seemed happy with. I would have felt bad if there was something else I could have done for them, but there wasn't, so screw that guy. I mean, he said I'm not very happy and he smiled. He wanted a free drink and unfortunately he got it. A lady from the real estate agency next door ordered a chicken box and then proceeded to drive an hour to her next showing, in the middle of summer, where it probably sat right in front of her AC unit in the passenger seat. Surprise, surprise, the food gets cold when left in the cold. Who knew? Upon the shocking discovery that the food doesn't stay warm, she called us to scream at my boss that we tried to kill her. Because he's a spineless pushover in the summer, he agreed to give her a new free meal when she came back. She came to get her free food and things didn't improve. One of our chefs came to collect her cold food. While still in front of the window, he opened the box and fished out the uneaten biscuit. He threw the rest away but walked away with the bread. I presume he meant to eat it, but he went about it all wrong. She started screaming about how we were recycling food and that she was good friends with the health inspector and that she was going to see us in court. The histrionics brought my boss out of his office, and after chewing out the idiot chef, he tried to smooth things over. I don't remember much, we were busy as fudge, and since he'd taken over the drive-thru, I hopped onto another task. She would not move forward and the line was piling up. My boss was starting to get annoyed. They'd stopped talking to each other. Her hot, fresh meal was up, and he goes to hand deliver it and tell her to get the F out of line. I'm not entirely sure, as I was halfway across the store trying to make drinks. All I remember is the surprised gasp from our food runner and looking up to see a box of steaming hot chicken sailing through the window and scattering across the front of house. My boss had barely stepped back in time. We could only stare as the crazy lady roared out of the parking lot, and he snapped at the first person stupid enough to still be making eye contact to clean it up. Fast food near a high school about a decade ago. The absolute worst were the mums. We had one who came in weekly and screamed about wrong orders or whatever complaints she could dream up so she could get her free food for her entire family. Then you get the loser D-bags who think giving the staff a hard time is funny. And the absolute worst customer was the owner of the franchise. He'd walk in, test employees, and then fire someone for some issue so minor it was likely just made up. I'm sure that one still happens in some places occasionally, but I don't think people are as likely to casually fire staff in low-paying jobs in the US now, given how much of a shortage most places seem to have. Silver lining, I guess. Bartending in a restaurant a few years ago. There was a private party and one of the guests asked me to plug in his phone to listen to a song. No big deal, I did it and he tipped me $20. He left his phone behind the bar and then got wasted. When he was leaving, I said, "Sir, don't forget about your phone," and he threw a beer on me and told me to leave him the F alone and told me to get a real job. So guess who got to keep a nice new iPhone? We had someone do a runner once and they left their phone. Reasonably expensive one, although this was over 15 years ago, so I can't remember if they were as much as they are now. He sheepishly came back the next day asking if one had been handed in. Our boss said no and kept the phone. We had that happen all the time too. When the jerk would come back the next day looking for their phone, the manager would say, "Hold on, let me go check the office. In the meantime, you can close out your $100 tab from last night too." If the guy paid the $100, he'd get his phone. If he refused to pay, the phone was never found. Not exactly doing God's work, but at least it was some consolation for dealing with rude, drunk buttholes who disrespect the employees of the bar. I had a guy that was a germaphobe and had really bad OCD. He came through before, and my coworker just didn't want to deal with him. So I went to the drive-thru window after washing my hands. I cashed out the order that was on the screen, and he reluctantly handed over his card. I gave him the coffee that I'd cashed him out for. He started yelling at me, saying that it was wrong. Apparently, the person that took the order forgot to type it in, which is unfortunate, but it happens. He started yelling at the coworker that didn't want to take his order at the window. So instead of just saying that it was the wrong order, getting refunded, and being on his way, he stayed in the driveway for 20 minutes telling my coworker that she was stupid and unprofessional and was unfit to be a supervisor. He kept demanding that we get the phone number of our franchise owner, but apparently the number was wrong and he kept yelling at us. But when he came back to the window after 20 minutes of this, he left. My supervisor went into the back to cry. I felt so bad for her. She's a sweet person. Fast forward to less than a month later, he called the store to apologize, and the manager made sure that my coworker never dealt with him again, but that he could come in as long as he didn't make a scene. He then told the manager that his therapist told him he should apologize, and then spent a combined total of 3 hours on the phone with the manager, where he apologized and also blamed us for making him late to his appointment that day, and at the end of the phone call, he asked if we were hiring. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I worked at a bakery for 2 years and I had to deal with honestly the most heinous and rude customers ever. I've worked in the food service industry my whole life and lived in Toronto up until about 3 years ago, and I've never dealt with such entitlement. Anyways, one day one of our staff members quit by text message 5 minutes before her shift and 30 minutes before we were set to open at 8 AM on a Saturday. We were hard-pressed finding somebody to cover, so I was alone until a front-of-house person was able to come in about an hour later. I had one of the kitchen staff helping me, and all they could do was grab things and bag them, as they weren't trained on cash or coffee. So there I was, running around, trying to help customers, make coffees, ring people through, and clearly very stressed. This D-bag man was also clearly annoyed that he had to wait, and was huffing and puffing, and eventually exclaimed, "F this, I'm not effing waiting for this crap," and proceeds to throw his bagged muffin at my head and storm out. I legitimately almost chased him down. I was livid. Customers are bull. A customer ordered one of our daily specials and didn't like it, so instead of complaining to me about the food and letting me offer something else, she complained to my manager about me. This was May of last year. In August of last year, turns out she was one of my college professors for the semester, teaching a management course. I used to manage a restaurant and I hated those couple of times in my 5 years of working there when some entitled customer left without paying because, well, the waitress didn't come to pick up my money. That's a piece of crap move and a poor excuse, when all you need to do is grab a waitress's attention by simply talking. Once it was a family of 4 who left the restaurant during a busy evening, and we realized that the bill wasn't paid after some 10 minutes had passed. I checked the cameras and saw the father taking the bill, putting the money in, sitting there for about 3 or 4 minutes looking around, and then taking the money back and leaving with the whole family. Luckily, our owner was a great guy and told me to simply ban the F word in his family, and to my surprise, that piece of crap came back with friends on a busy evening in a couple of months. I was very excited watching his face being embarrassed in front of his friends and customers sitting outside when I told him he was banned, and when his wife started to get upset, I told them I remembered them and told them the whole story with me checking the cameras and seeing him take the money back and everything. Had a man and his wife come in during a really busy lunch rush. He was rude off the bat, interrupting me, not wanting to listen to me speak, whatever, that happens all the time. He was very adamant that he wanted both chips and salsa and a plate of roasted wings as appetizers. He kept emphasizing that he wanted them together before they ordered their lunch, even though chips and salsa only take a minute and wings take about 12. I rang them in together because of how he ordered them. In hindsight, I should have made completely sure, but you know. Not 3 minutes later, the man is waving at my coworker across the restaurant, yelling at her about how they've been there for 30 minutes and his appetizer is taking too long and he wants it before his wings. I was at a party table, so she ran back and grabbed the chips and the wings, which were somehow up as well, and brought them out. He took one bite of a wing and tossed the plate like a frisbee across the table towards her and started complaining about them being cold. I rushed over to see what was going on and he starts yelling at me, saying his food is awful and this is the worst service he's ever gotten in his life. I don't do well with grown men yelling at me, so I went to the kitchen and my manager went out and thankfully had my back as much as he could, and made the guy pay for the wings and chips and then leave. After he left, I started to clean the table where I found the single penny he'd tipped me with, that my coworker promptly threw in the trash, and got a call from my general manager asking why a man had called me professionally challenged on Yelp. Okay, well, that's at least an insult that I haven't heard before, so we have to give him points for being original. Extrapolating a 3-minute wait into a 30-minute one is either delusional or this guy was angling for a free meal, so don't beat yourself up. I worked at a Vietnamese restaurant back in high school and I had a Viet family come in to eat. They gave me a snobby vibe the entire time, especially after I told them I couldn't speak Vietnamese. They ordered a regular pho, but asked for no cilantro. So I rang the order in with no cilantro, and it came out with cilantro on it anyway, and I told the kitchen what the family asked. The kitchen told me they couldn't do anything about it, so I told my manager, and they told me to ask the family if they still wanted it. Family said yes, so I bought it out and they took out the cilantro and ate the entire thing. At the end of the meal, they spoke to the owner and complained about how I got their order completely wrong. They got the food for free and got their bill taken out of my pay. The owner told me I should have removed the cilantro myself. Crappy management, crappy customer. Any table that mentioned the tip at all. Oh, don't worry, we tip well. Or, if you do X, we'll tip big. We'll take care of you. Holding the tip over my head doesn't get you better service, you get the same everyone else does. They were always pretentious and rude, and they never tipped well in the end. My friend works at a restaurant. A vlogger was shooting a video, and since it was allowed within the place, nobody troubled her. Apparently, she wanted something very particular for her clickbait thumbnails, so she asked my friend to place his face in her cleave while she squirted ketchup on herself. My friend refused as he was in a relationship, but some other employee agreed to do so. After they shot the thumbnail, she marched in the next day claiming that they'd done so against her will. I don't know what happened after that, but it did not turn out well for the liar. This old guy who asked if I was included in the order. I'm 17. This happened to me when I was about that age. Some guy asked if I was on the dessert menu. I pretended so hard not to understand him that he actually got embarrassed, left a generous tip, and politely left without another word. I worked fast food in high school, and I've got a few. 1. A man orders a double cheeseburger with extra cheese and receives one with 4 slices instead of the usual 2. 2 minutes later, he's absolutely red in the face and screaming at the poor cashier. He's demanding to talk to the little turd that made his sandwich and asking if we think this is some kind of joke. Apparently, when he ordered extra cheese, he wanted 1 extra slice, not 2. Then some guy comes to the drive-thru and orders 4 fish sandwiches. We only had 2 pieces of fish cooked, and they were really close to their hold expiration time. Since we had to cook more anyway, my manager said to waste those 2 since they were old and make all fresh ones for the customer. The guy comes up to the window and they ask him to pull forward because it'll be a couple of minutes. Meanwhile, we keep serving other cars. After a couple of orders go out, this guy is in the lobby and asking for a manager. He's irate that we made him wait for his food while serving other people. The manager apologizes and explains the situation. Most people would be thrilled that we didn't serve them old food, but for some reason that just made this guy angrier. He starts yelling louder and then threatens my manager with physical violence over it. She asks him to leave and threatens to call the police. The guy storms out, slamming the door so hard that he broke the latch, and squeals his tires as he leaves the parking lot, without his order. And he never came back for it or his money either. And finally, we had this regular who came in every Sunday morning and ordered the same thing. A side salad, supersized fries, and a Happy Meal for her grandkid. One day, the person who bagged her order put the salad and the fries in the same bag as they were trained to do. If you've never seen a supersized fry container, they're tall. And the side salad is one of those little rectangular plastic things. So as you can imagine, the fries fell over. For a normal person, this is no big deal. But not for this lady. She needed new fries and a new salad in separate bags this time. Of course, the fries we'd already made that came up 1 minute ago were not good enough, and she refused to leave or accept the new ones until we made a fresh basket. Ugh. I waited tables for a few years in college, and the worst table that I ever had was a Catholic priest and some guy he was trying to hit up for donations. The whole meal, he was very condescending and demanding. After everything was done, I left the check at the table. He ended up walking out, stiffing me not just on the tip, but on the entire check. He even stole the leather check holder thing. I reported this to my manager. A couple of weeks later, the same guy comes in with about 20 members of his congregation. My manager told him he wasn't welcome in our restaurant after walking out on his previous tab in front of his whole party. They all ended up leaving to go elsewhere. Best manager I've ever had. Pizza, ice cream, sandwich shop in a small rural town. I was on delivery. We had this guy who ordered maybe once a week or so. This guy lived a solid half an hour outside of town. None of us knew why the owner ever agreed to deliver to this guy in the first place, being that far out, but we used to wonder if the owner was being threatened into it. The level of crap this customer would raise if you didn't bring him cheese and peppers for his pizza was absolute madness. There was an incident where a delivery driver found the customer waiting on his porch polishing a shotty, and the first thing the customer did was loosely point the weapon towards the driver and say, "Did you bring my cheese and peppers?" We fully believed the guy would have shot our driver if the answer had been no. As it was, the driver didn't have as much cheese and pepper as the customer would have liked. The customer called the restaurant and threw a fit. From then on, when we delivered to this customer, because the owner didn't cut him off, we were told to take a bucket of cheese and peppers with us. I'm talking like one of those bulk ice cream buckets you buy at the supermarket. We all kept it in our trucks, but we had to start taking an extra just for this one customer. I wonder if the guy was even in it for the pizza. Forget the hate. Teachers reveal the surprising positives about Gen Z. Well, for one thing, nerd and geek culture is more accepted. At my school, they're the ones with the largest friend groups. I feel like nerd and geek culture will dissolve and being a nerd will become the norm as technology advances. I wouldn't be surprised if that whole term was growing pains and us as a culture mentally are just adjusting to the rise of technology. University teacher here, my students put in way more effort than I did at their age. Granted, the system has pushed them in that direction as well, but they typically have a better idea of where they want their career to go, and they're willing to put in the effort to obtain that goal. By comparison, I and my cohort mucked about a lot more. Students aren't afraid to just be nice to each other. I teach elementary art, and it's so nice when a kid who's pretty unskilled in art shows another kid their work, and instead of getting laughed at, like when I was in school, the kids are just so sweet and will say things like, "Oh, wow, I really love that." I hear kids telling other kids, "I think your work is beautiful," or "I really like your ideas." And I just think of when I was in art and kids made fun of my work. In general, I really don't see kids being bullies as much as they were when I was a kid. I went to school in a really nice district too, with few problems, but I was bullied. Kids here have a much worse home life than my kids at my old school, and while they could choose to take it out on others, they just don't seem to. Kids help each other too. They know if a kid is special and will try to help that student out. They'll offer to walk them to the bathroom or help them with their drawing, or very politely tell them to be careful with things. My girlfriend is a teacher, and she's amazed at how uncool drinking and driving is. Kids are like, "That's stupid, you'll kill someone." They'll literally make fun of kids who do it. In my day, everyone drove drunk. It's a very positive change. They seem to be generally kinder to each other, especially to the kids who are different. When I was in school, the kids who didn't speak English as their first language or were a little quirky or had disabilities were either avoided or viciously bullied. Today, that seems to be the exception rather than the norm. Oh, well, they may be kind, but German children have always been Kinder. Okay, well, you can go straight to jail for that pun, follow-up commenter. But atrocious linguistic crimes against humanity aside, I am heartened to see this, and it does track with what I've seen. Bullies and more subtle forms of beating each other down and manipulation definitely do still exist, don't get me wrong, but kids, if nothing else, seem more at liberty to be themselves without fear of persecution, and that's something to celebrate. I'm not a teacher, but I work the 2 till 10 shift at the local gas station across from the junior high and high school. Kids these days are a lot nicer. They're more likely to donate to our fundraisers, and they have zero problems for paying for each other's stuff when someone's short. I worried about my son, who has mild autism, for the first 10 years of his life. My son is 11, and I'm 30. I kept telling him that middle school would be hard, that kids would tease him, and that high school would be even harder in that same respect. 15 years ago, I might have been right. Fast forward to now, and I'm constantly amazed and grateful for how well treated he is. Even the jock kids and big snotty idiot kids who would have made the perfect bullies are inclusive, kind, and even sometimes protective of my son. I've told them all how appreciative I am, and even got a few of them Christmas presents this year. Love those kids. My daycare kids are much more likely to wash their hands than my generation was when we were their age. Huh. Girls ask boys out more often. Boys are starting to expect girls to be more frank and straightforward with what they want more often. Other than that, I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. They're generally kinder, more generous, understanding of differences, and very mature for kids. On the other hand, I find them generally more sad, kinda cynical, and overall quite happily pessimistic towards the future. A sort of, we are so screwed vibe, I feel sometimes. I'm not a teacher, but my girlfriend's mum is a teacher, and it sparked a dialogue. With the dawn of meme culture, kids are getting competitive with comedy at an early age. When I was a kid, I had undiagnosed mental health issues, so I was bullied a lot, and the only thing that kept me alive was developing my sense of humor. Sad as it is, young people do have a pecking order and cliques, but a few things can transcend those boundaries, and one of those is humor. Coincidentally, I was into internet humor, meme culture, and PC games way before my peers were. You want to hear something crazy? I was bullied for that. Specifically and mercilessly. If you ran a meme page and had a nice gaming page at 10 today, You'd be a god. It honestly made a lot of kids that don't fit in have at least something in common with their peers. All you have to do is yell, "Fortnite!" or whatever meme is going around that week, and boom, you've made a friend. I had one time where I was able to make friends like that, and that was when Pokemon came out. Similar concept. You might think that stuff is kind of cringe or annoying or stupid, but if it can prevent someone from going to the dark places that kids go even when they're as young as 12, like I did at that age, I'll allow it. Of course, I don't need to have it anywhere near me, but that's a different matter. They're generally independent and self-reflective. When I first started teaching, I thought I'd simply lucked out, getting students who were consistently bright, engaged, and curious. But having now taught at 3 different universities on 2 different continents, it seems to be a general trend across universities. They are also, as noted elsewhere, generally kind and empathetic, and both my male and female students are usually pretty emotionally mature. With high schoolers, I really noticed how much better their style is. Super random, but compared to how lazy I dressed in high school, it's impressive. I asked my wife, who's a primary school teacher, and she says empathy and adaptability are the 2 traits she's seen dramatically improve over the last 15 years. Kids seem to be better at putting themselves in one another's positions and understanding their situations. Also, they seem to be much more flexible with changes, whether in the classroom or the outside world. Funnily enough, I feel like the internet and global culture contribute to this a lot. Granted, I think the internet can be a really bad influence on young kids, but it really removes the bubble a lot of us had when we were younger. Having a global perspective and understanding of how different people are everywhere around the world also helps put our small interpersonal differences in perspective as well. I feel like that does a lot for the kids of today, though they probably don't even realize it. Spouse to a high school teacher. She had this to say. They were born into the internet and social media. It's not something they had to learn like we did. Also, as a result of which, they're also more self-reliant with research. And most importantly, contrary to the largest complaints, today's kids are extremely hardworking and are less judgy of nerds, and less judgmental in general. As a student currently in high school, the big thing for our generation, at least in the decent schools, is that failure isn't cool. Sure, if you suck up to the teacher and obsess over studying, you'll get made fun of a bit, but the kids getting Fs get made fun of a lot more. A lot of the popular kids are actually really smart and get top grades. There's a general awareness that we all need to do well and a lot of aspiration for the future. When I was in high school, which was literally 2.5 years ago, a lot of the popular kids in our school were the overachievers. Kids who took honors and AP classes while playing on the school sports team. I'm a teacher at a high school in Missouri. All of the stereotypes you hear and see in rural high schools are still prevalent, however, almost every group works harder academically. It's no longer cool to get Fs and fail. Even country boys who'll never leave the farm or go to college care about getting passing grades. More than 600 students in our high school, by the way. These kids really get each other, man. As much as they diss on each other, joke around, and yes, get to the point of blows, they can usually put issues aside. Sometimes to a fault, but overall, they're pretty understanding of each other. As someone who is a youth of today, I've literally never seen bullying. Where I live, people are kind of jerks sometimes, but not bullies. And I can agree. As I got older, I noticed that kids just don't bully as much. They just leave the people they don't like alone. When I was in high school, I didn't notice any bullying. All of my issues had to do with willingly being around the wrong people. I'm not saying bullying doesn't exist, I'm just saying that it's decreasing. I was bullied until high school, so I know what the different forms of bullying can be like. I was excluded and made fun of. When I got to high school, people just left people like me and others alone. Kids are openly kind and loving regarding their parents. I had a tough football player in class once say, "I love my mom, she's the best." I see the old, "ugh, my parents suck" mentality falling by the wayside recently. Didn't think about this angle, but yeah, now that you mention it, I do see teens being affectionate with their parents all the time, and that's great. I was generally kind of a mama's boy early on, and even I would never think to be seen dead being nice to my mother before or after school while I was growing up. I should clarify I'm not a teacher, but a former after-school care counselor. Even though it might have just been the schools or rules or conditioning, the kids were generally so good at apologizing, owning up to their actions, and being accepting of others' apologies. After whatever situation transpired had calmed down, of course. They always knew to kindly and carefully approach whoever they hurt, make eye contact, and word their apologies in such a way that effectively communicated their apology for the correct reasons. And those being apologized to always knew to say, "I accept your apology," as opposed to, "it's okay." Kids in my day couldn't figure out those kinds of communication skills until at least middle or high school. The only time I'd get a sarcastic sorry accompanied with an eye roll and running away would be from a kindergartner or an older child facing other difficulties. I taught art for a spell a while back. I knew that a lot of people say crap like, oh, these children and their all-consuming technology, but a lot of kids are so excited about learning to make things using their devices. A big part of the sculpture class I taught was to make a statement using a 3D printed sculpture. Even taking something like Minecraft, I know it's a big meme, but it's a huge sandbox to build things with. I remember being a young teen when it came out. We'd get so complex with all of our builds. Kids are learning to create in an incredibly different way. It can be really irritating when they latch onto something and run it into the ground, but they love learning new things and creating new things in an increasingly relevant way. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Oh man, I love these answers. They're giving me hella hope for the future. I wonder how the subculture kids are doing. Are there still goths and punks? I really miss my clique of goth teens from high school. Those were the best days. I don't really see a lot of that. Someone's keeping Hot Topic alive, but I'm not sure it's the teens. Middle school teacher here, there's a lot more emo than goth or punk. Even then, there's not as many. There seem to be groups for everyone, which has been lacking in previous generations. Secondary school. There's a lot less cigarette smoking than 20 years ago. A lot of kids use their Juuls, but to be honest, I'd rather have that than cigarette smoking. Video games are a lot more accepted. Not just a niche played by nerds in arcades after school. Every social group plays video games. Kids are more literate than when I was in high school. Even if they speak English as a second language, the ubiquity of the internet has done wonders for basic literacy, although a lot of mistakes due to the way words sound are still common. The different spellings of there, or should of and could of, etc. The 8-year-olds I teach really make a huge deal about plastic. We watched the Blue Planet 2 episode with them, and since then they've been so mindful and really want to protect the oceans. Getting pretty witty. Today we were talking about India and sacred cows. A kid asked if that meant that his mum was sacred to Indians. America's youth has a renewed interest in flossing. Dentists rejoice. The majority of my students are in the 18 to 22 age range. I'm 37 for reference. Students are far kinder than they were everywhere when I was a student. They go out of their way to help each other, and they're much less judgmental than my cohort was. For the most part, they're really polite and respectful. I know a lot of professors deal with problems from cell phones, but I find that if I tell them to use their phones respectfully and only for class purposes, they do. The only real problem I seem to have with this cohort is the constant headphone wearing, but I think that's a battle I'm just going to lose. I'm a little late to the party on this one, but I'm a high school teacher. I teach both honors and inclusion classes, so I get a great variety of kids. Today, one of my students was very harsh to an autistic student who tried to politely sit next to her and charge his laptop. She said, "You're not sitting next to me," and put her leg in the chair so he couldn't sit down. Before I could respond, 5 of the tough girls in class immediately jumped to the student's defense, calling the girl rude and really letting her have it. They were firm and composed in their defense of the student and probably made the kid's day. Teaching can be really rough sometimes, but they made me really proud today. I think a lot of our modern-day students are compassionate for others and incredibly intelligent. Don't let their overuse of smartphones fool you. I've been getting tens of hours shadowing teachers at every level over the last 2 semesters for my teaching course, and I can say that there's a lack of bullying that I've noticed at high school, middle school, and elementary. I feel I have a unique perspective, as since I wasn't the teacher, kids acted more naturally when it was just me observing in the corner. In probably 50-plus hours of observation, I haven't seen more than one instance of kids being outright mean to each other, and in that case it was just 2 kids roasting each other and nothing really physical. I teach on the college level. From what I can tell, many of them seem more open to having a variety of kind of friends. Where I teach has a big hookup and party culture, but they seem to have genuine cross-gender friendships despite that, and in my opinion, that's been good for them. I feel like I should specify, since this comment got a lot of attention, that this is dependent on who's available to you in terms of variety. For example, I went to a very diverse undergrad and had all kinds of friends. My students go to a very, very white college and don't have a lot of diversity in their friendships as a result, but I think a fair amount of that is structural. The frats where I'm at are super proactive when it comes to protecting the female students too. They'll have sober people watching others to make sure nobody takes advantage of drunk people, which is pretty neat. They've also restricted party access a lot. Instead of paying money at the door, you usually have to have someone in a frat who can vouch for you before you can buy a wristband that gives you access. Kinda sucks for the new people like me and my friends, but it gives fraternities greater control over their parties and makes them much more safe. In a frat at school with a pretty big party and hookup culture as well. We've got a minimum of 3 guys sober at every party, making sure nobody drinks too much and no drunk people get taken advantage of. We don't sell wristbands to parties, but male guests are only allowed in if a brother brings them and notifies the risk management committee at least a day in advance. I know that this comment goes into those in their 20s rather than the real Zoomers we're meant to be focusing on, but honestly, frats being this accountable and safe is a really good progression from where I stand. Sure, some people might gripe about the lack of freedom, but honestly, if it sees a reduction or elimination of some of the shady crap these places are famous for, that's all good. The high school students I work with today seem significantly more emotionally intelligent than those of my generation, especially the young men. They're more aware of their own feelings, and they're better at separating their feelings from fact. Like, they're more likely to say, I'm feeling X, Y, or Z negative emotion right now than, ugh, this teacher just hates me, what a B-word. They're also better at seeing and accommodating emotions in other people. There's more awareness of and sympathy for mental issues. Here's an illustration. The other day, some of the students I coached were conversing, and one young man asked how frequently they had a good cry. And all of them answered, and he said, I think I'm overdue for a good cry. And his peers started suggesting good movies to induce tears. It was an utterly shocking scene for me. I mean, great, but nothing I would have ever expected. Kids can be stunningly introspective and empathetic when you ask them to talk about their interpersonal issues. There's a real effort to perspective taking that goes beyond what I encountered at that age. Also, the kids I work with have some selection bias, to be fair, but the ones I encounter as a whole care a lot about current events. It's actually cool to know and care about what's going on, and it's uncool not to. This is very different from how I grew up. I think a lot of them would agree with the statement, being smart is cool and learning new things is fun, which seems simplistic, but it isn't true of everyone. I think it's related to the pressure to get into college. This pressure to be more well-rounded in your interests is a double-edged sword. Kids get social capital from being exposed to different ideas and cultivating interests, but it's also a difficult race to model yourself into some ideal. I should clarify that I'm a coach, not a teacher, so my sample size is more homogeneous. I'm also in a unique position where I regularly interact with a real mix of kids, like your urban public school kids who are mostly low-income students of color, largely white, wealthy suburban public school kids, and first-year college students. These observations apply across that spectrum. As an ex-college professor, contrary to belief, they seem to be better at helping each other out and giving their point of view on a topic or idea. When teaching before, they'd try to explain to each other how I'd explained them to do it. Now they go look for other ways, both good and bad, on YouTube and explain different things they've found on YouTube. This mentality can be bad if it doesn't always hold true. I taught math, but other ways of explaining I hadn't thought about. It's refreshing to see the more open sharing of ideas. This may be that they listen better to their peers than to me, but if it helps, I'm not complaining. Both my parents are teachers, and I interact with junior high and high schoolers often at my job and talk to them constantly. One of them will be like, hey, I bought you a snack. Oh, no thanks, I'm trying to stay away from sugar. I'm trying to impress a girl. Oh, if she likes you for who you are, you don't have to worry about what you look like. Okay, you woke as frick little baby, take your healthy outlook on romantic courtship somewhere else. This is a self-esteem free zone. Kindness. My college students are kind and supportive of one another most of the time. There's been a large influx of Fortnite dancing and saying of, oof. Just in case you didn't know, oof is from a free online games platform for kids called Roblox. When a character dies in the game, an oof sound is played. It can mean, that sucks, when used in conversation. Today, a man told me, your generation is super assertive. So when you're all old, you'll speak up when the elderly aren't being treated the way they should be. You'll have the guts to stand up for what you believe is right. And I liked that. I mean, true, but when we're middle-aged, we're just going to be a nightmare. A realization that any sort of specialization is a good thing, and that a 4-year college isn't necessary for everyone. Lots of my students want to go to tech or trade schools or apprenticeships. They're learning from my debt-laden generation. And okay, just to respond to some of the questions I'm getting, my god, people, I don't welcome my kids to class every day and tell them that college is for chumps and to become an electrician. If a student tells me their goals and they can be well achieved through trade or vocational school, I do encourage it. If a student tells me their goals and they need to go to university, then I encourage that. As a general rule, they're more understanding and forgiving if somebody is different. Don't get me wrong, some of them are still jerks to those kids, but it is a shrinking minority. I run soccer camps for kids. Kids today are much smarter and much more informed than I ever was. Like, even kids as young as 12 have a basic grasp of modern social issues. I live on a block with a lot of kids, and I babysit frequently. Let me tell you, these kids are geniuses. Half of them are doing multiplication before first grade. They read like crazy and actually use technology responsibly. When kids first started using iPads, I was real mad. I thought it was going to lead to a bunch of addiction issues and stuff like that. I don't know if it's the parents in my neighborhood or what, but these kids seem to understand that they have 1 hour of iPad games every day and that's it. There's only a couple of them that have issues with that. Golden oldies? These vintage games are better than anything today. Command & Conquer Red Alert 2. Worms. Simple, stupid, awesome game. Ratchet & Clank. I've been playing through again recently and I can't think of any game that's just this plain fun to play. I also recently learned that doing flips in front of the hoverboard girl in Blackwater City will make her chest grow. The Sims 2. Everything about it is perfect to me. The music especially. It has a goofiness and warmth that you don't really see much these days. And the modding community is quite active too. The Sims 2 is my favorite game ever. I feel like the newer games are lacking some of the humor and whimsy of Sims 1 and 2. 007 Nightfire. My buddies and I used to play the multiplayer all night long, setting all the bots as Yakuza and laughing our butts off when they'd get stuck running into a wall. I really miss Tetris. I actually just got into Tetris 99, which you can get now. The Battle Royale system is terrifying but addictive. The Simpsons Hit and Run. I've said, that sucks and blows for years and finally realized I got it from this game like a year ago. Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Me and a friend of mine still meet and have showdowns 2 or 3 times a year. Can't get enough of this game. Highly recommend Jeebus Cross, where you can play simultaneously, and Horn of the Abyss mod. GTA Vice City. Frickin' classic. Fun fact, we're farther away in time from the date of Vice City's release than Vice City was from the date of its story. Oh. Until recently, Age of Empires 2. The only reason I stopped was because I switched to the definitive edition when it came out. Oh man, I think Age of Mythology was the best. Diablo 2. Greetings, stranger. I'm not surprised to see your kind here. San Andreas. I sometimes love to play it and drive around the city and cry for the old days. Isn't it funny how every time you start a new game, when CJ's coming back to the hood to start the main story, you, the player, are also coming back to the hood. The old alleyways and shortcuts, the old Cluck and Bell you threw up in, the old park where the drive-by happened. The graphics will get old, but the story never will. None of the other games ever captured open world as perfectly as San Andreas. There was something so special about driving through the desert or countryside while listening to some random radio station in the middle of the night to get to the next city. Also, all my exes live in Texas. Morrowind. The original Fable. Fable. Hero, your health is low. Do you have any potions or food? Try to get your combat multiplier even higher. Am I just looking for words to mispronounce in my best Matt Berry voice? Why, yes I am, thank you for noticing. This is one of those games that I've never got into, probably due to it being console locked when I was the right age for it. I tried playing it on Steam when it released there, but by then it was a bit dated and I lacked the rose-tinted glasses for it. Oh well, I'll just play through Half-Life 2 for the 80th time. Super Mario 64. Now I have the castle music stuck in my head just thinking about it. My friend always busts out the N64 for his birthday. We play GoldenEye, Bomberman 64, and sometimes Mario Kart. Does once a year count as regularly? Oh, and every now and then I'll dig out mine and play Pokemon Snap. I've always felt this was a massively underloved game. I bet it'd be amazing with modern graphics and game engines. Maybe they could even have a course creator mode where people could submit their own routes. Wii Sports Resort. It makes me super happy to see so many other people still play this as well once in a while. The Secret of Monkey Island. I've spoken with apes more polite than you. Oh, well, how appropriate. You fight like a cow. RuneScape. I got back into old school like 2 years ago when I heard they released it on mobile, and now I'm 3,200 hours deep and have 7 skill capes. I can't remember the last time I played a video game that wasn't OSRS. Crash Bandicoot. Yoshi's Island is fantastic. I just started playing it last year. I'd always put it off because I thought that baby Mario's crying would be too obnoxious to deal with. Big mistake. The game is great. Minesweeper. Classic. It's a shame it's not a default game on Windows anymore. I used to play it on the school computers. I mean, if you want to play a local version, try one of the clones that's acceptable for world records. Quake, Doom, and StarCraft. Space Pinball on Windows. Just search Full Tilt Pinball on My Abandonware. Battlefront 2, the original one. We've captured another command post. Keep it up. Watch those wrist rockets. Just like the simulations. KOTOR, Knights of the Old Republic. It's on iOS now, so you can play mobile. Still the two best Star Wars games of all time. Little Big Planet. The game is so nostalgic. I recommend those who haven't played it definitely do so. Oh, and Rayman. That game is incredibly fun. Assassin's Creed 2. I love everything about it. It could also be Halo Reach for me. Several Pokemon games, Total Annihilation and KOTOR 2. Fallout New Vegas. It feels like I always find something new. Nintendo 64 games, GoldenEye, Pokemon Snap, Stadium, Banjo-Kazooie, DK64, I guess that means Donkey Kong, and Ocarina of Time. Well, I'm about due for another playthrough of the Mass Effect trilogy. All of the Zelda games, Final Fantasy Tactics, which is my favorite all-time game, Star Wars Battlefront 1 and 2, with 1 being my preferred split-screen version with friends, and various other SNES games. Age of Empires 2, Roller Coaster Tycoon 2. Left 4 Dead. Pokemon Emerald on the Game Boy Advance and Star Fox Adventures on the GameCube. I'm a sucker for older, early 2000s Nintendo games. Star Fox Adventures was gifted to me along with a used GameCube my dad found at a market for $50 back in 2005. It was the greatest day of my life. Mario Kart Wii. This one is my favorite. I enjoyed 8 for the new graphics and creative map designs, but the Wii is the best for me. I loved it. The soundtrack was perfect too. Maybe it's just nostalgia, maybe it really is that good. Smash Bros. Melee. Online has matchmaking. Recently got online netplay with rollback netcode. Mario Kart Double Dash, but just mainly for its 8-player LAN mode. Age of Mythology. Road Rash. Also, screw Biff. If every couple of years counts as regularly, then BioShock and BioShock 2. Just bought the collection for PlayStation 4. I played them back on PlayStation 3 all the time, but never got around to the DLCs for Minerva's Den or BAS. Looking forward to going through them again. Team Fortress 2. Dark! Come on, man! Perfect Dark. Well, Minecraft is 16 years old, so I guess that. I'd also keep playing more Gen 3 Pokemon games, but no internet connectivity makes it a moot point for me. I hope Gen 4 gets a remake soon. Mega Man X. I have yearly playthroughs of Ocarina of Time, A Link to the Past, and Chrono Trigger, and I haven't gotten bored of them after all these years. LEGO Star Wars, The Complete Saga. It's a perfect game. It's still one of my favorite games for Wii, and so therapeutic to just pick up the mini-kits, even though the blue ones are a bit of a chore. Half-Life 2. It's not that old, but it's still platinum. Super Metroid on the SNES emulator, and Duke 3D. Final Fantasy 7 and 8, Hogs of War, Age of Empires 2, Heroes of Might and Magic 2 and 3. Transport Tycoon Deluxe on the PC via OpenTDD, Morrowind on the PC via OpenMW, UFO Enemy Unknown on the PC via OpenXCOM, Quake 2 on the PC, available even after the Debian repositories, and Rock'n'Roll Racing, SNES via emulator. Paper Mario and Paper Mario TTYD. Skate 3 if it counts. If not, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Heritage for the Future. Symphony of the Night. Dragon Age Origins, Gears of War 2, Final Fantasy X, Ocarina of Time, Kingdom Hearts 1. Luigi's Mansion. Neopets. Every time someone mentions Neopets, I can't help but think of my yellow Jub sitting in his unfinished house made out of jelly, silver and gold, reading his one and only book about the large Jub, abandoned forever. Oh boy, the narrator has at least one of those little critters consigned to that very same fate. I feel bad, but at the same time, if they wanted me to look after that little guy, they should have made the game aspect feel more gamey. Neopets barely qualifies for this video as it is. Morrowind. The combat is terrible and the graphics are absolute dog crap, but I love the lore, the music, the environments, and the story so much. Populous, the beginning. It's still a brilliant game. Kniggets of the Old Republic 2. Super Mario Sunshine. GameCube games were just phenomenal. So that one, Monkey Ball 1 and 2, Luigi's Mansion, Godzilla Destroy All Monsters, and a couple more. I replay Epic Mickey every December. I don't know why, but it just puts me in a holiday spirit. Heroes of Might and Magic 3. Fallout 2. Halo Combat Evolved, especially the Silent Cartographer level. I'm a sucker for Final Fantasy 7 and 8. I'll be picking up 6 and 9 after I finish my current playthroughs of 7 on PC, because those seem to be highly recommended as well. SSX Tricky and Star Wars Battlefront 2, PlayStation 2 Classics. GTA 3. StarCraft. I've been playing StarCraft 2 for 10 years fairly consistently. StarCraft 1 and Brood War before that. There are so many great modes that keep things interesting. Another fan of Heroes of Might and Magic 3 here. I practically grew up with it. Caesar 3, of course. Still amazing. Marvel vs. Capcom 2. It's Marvel, baby. Chrono Trigger. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Classic World of Warcraft. Skyrim. Cool math games. Fallout New Vegas. Morrowind. A yearly playthrough is a must. I still play Modern Warfare 2, at least 10 hours per week. Believe it or not, the online lobbies are still plentiful, complete with the trash talk and the intermission fights. Dark Cloud 2. I love it, man. Great game. Fallout 1 and, wait for it, Fallout 2. I could play them blindfolded these days. Stronghold. Super Metroid. Super Mario RPG. I play it at least once a year. Maple Story. Super Mario Bros. 3. Max Payne, at least the first 2 games. Halo 3 Forever and Always. Spore. Is that old enough to count? Ratchet & Clank 3. It's still my favorite game after all these years. Galaga. Sonic 2, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Pokemon Fire Red, Paper Mario and PM Thousand Year Door, Mario Party 2, 4, 6, Mega Man and Mega Man X, Mega Man Zero series, Panel de Pon, Mario 3, and Mario World, and probably a ton more. Mount and Blade Warband. Super Mario 3, Donkey Kong Country, Bubble Bobble. SimCity 4 Forever, with the NAM mod of course. Still the best true city builder in my opinion. Dawn of War. I miss the RTS era. Dawn of War is timeless and the voice acting is on point. Solitaire. Spyro. The remastered versions were so good. Easily the best remake I've played. Everything about it feels exactly how I remembered the originals, and the updated graphics are incredible. It's somehow just how I remembered it looking as well. But going back to the originals is super rough on the eyes these days. 10 out of 10 perfect remakes. Plants vs. Zombies Garden Warfare. Harvest Moon on the GBA, the Stardew Valley prequel. Wii Sports, and I'd say I still play that regularly. Mainly tennis as well. The nostalgia is sometimes blinding, even going into the Wii. It was my first game console and game. The Oregano Trail, the Oregon Trail. It's nice to play a quick journey when you're bored and you can play it for free on archive.org, along with the 1992 Deluxe Edition. Mario Party on the N64, literally every weekend. The mini-games make excellent drinking games. Counter-Strike 1.6 and also GTA San Andreas. Victoria 2. It's a shame it's never getting a sequel. I know it's basic, but I haven't seen anyone else say it. SMB 3. Worms Armageddon. It still has a decent online community. I still boot up the old Tekken games every now and again, especially 2. My favorite game is, well, it sounds like Plastipus. It's a Russian game. I don't know if game is in English language, but it's a really good game. Has somebody heard about this game? I'm sorry because of mistakes. I just learned English and I want to have a little more practice. Red Alert 2: Yuri's Revenge. Wolfenstein 3D. Mass Effect. I start the trilogy in September and finish on November 7th, every year. Occasionally I'll go back to Call of Duty Modern Warfare just to play the campaign. And Call of Duty World at War had a certain feeling of brutality I felt was lacking in the other campaigns and is always worth a replay as well. It genuinely felt like a horrible place to be rather than some action film. Maybe it's the fact that your enemies would lose limbs. I don't remember that happening in any other Call of Duty game. There's a lot of classic games on my list, but I don't usually play through the entire game every time I boot them up. But I'll usually play all of them for at least a couple of hours, at least a few times a year. And I take old to mean nothing newer than the 2000s. So, to rattle it off in no particular order, Doom or Doom 2, Morrowind, Duke Nukem, Shadow Warrior, Postal 2, Painkiller Black, Brutal Legend, sometimes I just sit in the car and listen to the soundtrack, Hitman Blood Money, Descent 1, 2, and 3, Serious Sam First Encounter and Serious Sam Second Encounter, System Shock 1 and 2, Deus Ex, Devil May Cry 3, Thief 1 through 3, Far Cry 1 plus 2, Judge Dredd, Dredd vs. Death, Neverwinter Nights 1 and 2, Diablo 2, Torchlight, Nobody Lives Forever 1 and 2. A lot of them have level select options, but I can start from any point in these games and know exactly where I need to go and what I need to do next. So picking up where I last saved isn't a problem even if it has been several months. I will say that I double-took when you mentioned Torchlight. I was like, that game came out just before I went to college, it's not that old. And then I realized that means it was many, many years ago, and is more of a retro game now than 90s games were when I called those retro games. Being old feels real bad, you guys. Also, your taste is very different from mine if you like Far Cry 1. That game goes whack when the aliens show up. My gosh. Super Mario Bros. Not regularly, but Digimon World 1 and Vagrant Story once every year. Harvest Moon. Saints Row 2. This is the best game, and the only game I have the patience for. The game was washed over because of the rise of Grand Theft Auto, but because of this, the game has stayed a niche underground game, much to my pleasure. I love the customization, the storyline, and how hood the game was. They played real gangster music in this one, not that fake stuff. Sometimes I imagine real life could be that way, as I love inner-city urban life. The recent editions of Saints Row have nothing to do with the original theme of 2, and this saddens me, because I'd have loved for the game to remain the same, just with better graphics and more attention to detail. Sometimes I fantasize of a development company that sees the original essence of the game and updates it to GTA 4 quality, but I've come to terms that will never happen. Twisted Metal 2. Civilization 2. Doom 1. Frickin' classic. Unreal World. It's 32 years young, just like me. It's a roguelike set in Iron Age Finland where you get to survive. It's basically one big ode to indigenous peoples. The feeling you get when you finally get to kill a much-needed elk is amazing. It also has a fantastic way to simulate superstitious beliefs. One of my favorite moments was when I accidentally didn't blanch, boil to make safe to eat, some poisonous mushrooms and I made mushroom soup with them. Then my character started feeling sick and I understood my mistake. Went to the local sage to heal me and still felt sick. Took a sauna as my people believe that cleans the body of evil spirits, drank milkweed tea to help filter out the toxins, and repeated this for a day or two. I was about to succumb to the poison anyway. In desperation, I sacrificed some of the leftover soup to the spirits. It made my character feel at ease. I went to sleep, woke up, and was no longer poisoned. I don't know what worked or what didn't work, but I'm not gonna lie, I jumped up and down from happiness. I put hours into this character, you see. The game certainly made me feel superstitious and grateful to the spirits for healing me. The game tells you that superstitious acts might help. I don't know if this is true or not, it doesn't matter. I got fully sucked into the world, and when it put my character at ease, in a strange way, it did the same for real-life me. Totally worth checking out that game. It's free, or you can pay for it to get the better-looking and newer version. But the free one gives you a good idea of whether you would like it or not. I do a playthrough of Star Fox 64 once every couple of months. It's a good way to relax, and it only takes an hour or so to beat. Team Fortress 2. I still play through Kingdom Hearts 2 every year. The gameplay is just fantastic. The first one was the first video game I bought on my own. I nearly beat the entire first game on an unmodified Kingdom key because I didn't know you could change it. Such good memories. Tetris. Why don't people ever say Leisure Suit Larry? Well, because I still have PTSD from getting stuck towards the end. I think I forgot to bring a barf bag on a plane or something stupid like that. The original Doom. Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven. Just finished a playthrough of my good old pal GTA San Andreas, aka, all you had to do was follow the goddamn train, CJ! Here's a few. First, the Eye of the Beholder trilogy for DOSBox. It's a first-person dungeon crawler based on Dungeons & Dragons rules. You bring a party from 3rd level to 18th level over 3 games. It's massive, and the puzzles are excellent. The Nectaris or Military Madness series on DOSBox, TurboGrafx-16, SNES, and PSX. The SNES games are called Earthlight 1 and 2. It's a turn-based strategy game that's heavy on the strategy. Earthlight is all in Japanese, but once you play Nectaris, you can easily figure the games out. There's so much depth to the strategy. It's easily one of my favorite games of all time. I'll easily still be playing it in 30 years. Magic the Gathering Chandelier on Windows. This is the collectible deck-building card game set in a role-playing game world. You start out with a small deck, and you play computer opponents for ante, betting a card from your deck against one of theirs. You travel between towns in a randomly generated world, go on quests, fight the minions of bosses as you improve your deck. The original cards from the beginning of the card game are included here, including the 25 grand Black Lotus. A bunch of fans updated the artificial intelligence and added thousands of new cards over decades of the game. It's the experience of playing Magic the Gathering in 1995, 2000, and 2005. And finally, XCOM UFO Defense for DOSBox and PSX. This is the original turn-based tactical strategy game about Earth's defense of a hostile alien invasion with superior technology. The recent, updated version is amazingly good, but the original was just as good if not better. Every stage is randomized and no 2 games will ever be the same. The sequel, XCOM Terror from the Deep, is significantly harder even on the easiest difficulty section. Exposing the secret we don't dare mention. What my family hides behind closed doors. How about the secret of how my parents were able to afford a house suddenly while working a minimum wage job and having recently immigrated to America dirt poor? They'd never tell me where they got the money from. I'd bet you're not the only thing they smuggled in. The Thanksgiving meal prep where my mother got her hand stuck inside the frozen turkey for several hours. Bringing this one up gets you a laser beam eye death glare. Wow, are you part of Mr. Bean's extended family or something? My second cousin was always very introverted. Nobody ever really saw him, and he never really met anyone beyond the immediate family due to him just not being interested in knowing any of us. He left home and cut everybody off. Heck, I had no idea he existed. Fast forward and my cousin is excited to bring her husband to the family reunion. The 2 of them had eloped, so we didn't know who this mystery man was. She walks up and, well, there's our second cousin with her. The older family members knew exactly who he was and, well, they were expecting and married, so we said screw it and we just had the family reunion. We don't dare mention the cousin thing because it's been acknowledged and we all decided to move past it so as to not make them feel weird. As many have pointed out, it's not so much a genetic risk as much as a social taboo. I still love them the same. That time my mum was on Wheel of Fortune, it didn't go well. Okay, well now I'm just picturing Randy Marsh from South Park. I know it, but I don't think I should say it. Okay, so you're all going to be so disappointed in the reality of what happened on the show. I'm going to go off my memory here because, as the post states, we don't talk about it, so I can't really ask her for details. This was probably sometime in the 80s or early 90s. Basically, my mum knew every puzzle, but she'd spin one more time and each time hit bankrupt or lose a turn on the wheel. After the taping, Pat Sajak, another thing we don't talk about in our family, came up and said something to her along the lines of he had never seen anyone with such bad luck. I think she got $100 and the board game. My brother and I tried to play that board game, but she forbade it for many years. Why she didn't just throw it away, I'm not sure. Many years later, I got the Wheel of Fortune game for Nintendo, and I could only play it when she wasn't home. You know what? I'm going to say that she had a very legitimate grievance and reason to never want to see that show again. Playing perfectly and losing anyway, while other people play worse and win big, is absolutely infuriating. Take that from a guy who loves dice-based strategy games, and who's had multiple squad wipes out of nowhere on XCOM, baby. Logistically, my sister's first child cannot possibly have been her husband's biological kid, but he's claimed the child as his own. They eloped about 6 weeks before he was born, and there's no way he wasn't deployed when conception took place. She hasn't ever said a single word about it, but everyone knows. We're not sure if he's actually that bad at math because he is pretty dumb, or if he just didn't care. I mean, maybe he's got swimmer issues and they decided to do it with a donor. When my grandmother was diagnosed with end-stage cancer, she offered to end my father, who was doing some pretty obscene things to our family. And yes, my grandmother was a bad bee, but I'm biased. I really wish she was alive to see this. She survived for 7 years after her diagnosis. She was my mother's mother. She loved coffee with lots of cream and sugar, Carol Burnett, teaching real estate in the same coral pink suit, but most of all, she loved her family. To all the survivors of bad homes reading this, keep on keeping on. Don't let it define you. You were awesome before, and you're awesome now. I caught my parents smoking green herb once when I was young, and one day after I got yelled at for something, I threatened that I knew a secret that could, quote, tear this family apart. I just finished taking Dare, so I thought it was a big deal. My parents flipped out. Turns out my dad was having an affair and my mum had only slight suspicions, and I brought the whole thing to light. I had 2 uncles. My uncle accidentally ran over his brother when they were in their 20s and drunk one night. My other uncle died a few days later. It's not talked about. I only found out from my aunt when she was under anesthesia and just blurting out all kinds of stuff. I accidentally texted my family, I can't decide if tickling my pickle at my great-grandma's house is worth it or not, instead of to a different group chat. It doesn't get brought up, but oh boy do I think about that a lot. I've always wondered what circumstance could push me to deleting myself. Thanks for clearing that up for me. The rampant alcoholism. I'll drink to that. Me too, sadly. That my family was very involved with a small 50-family top-secret cult that included preparing for the end of the world and stockpiling canned goods and water in $1 million barn in the woods, surrounded by small cabins. My parents got recruited for this cult when I was 4 years old and left when I was 15. It was our whole life for a while. Everything revolved around it. All of our money went into it. My parents can't talk about it, and my mother flies into an insane rage if anything is even mentioned. I've never told anyone the whole story from start to finish, and I doubt I ever will. I could write a book about the bizarre childhood I had. The bunny incident. So we had a bunny at our dad's house a few years ago. It was named Wall-E. My dad has bad OCD, so he tried to wash it. And for people who don't know, you don't wash bunnies. Spoiler alert, the bunny didn't make it. That my mum had a baby at 17 and was forced to give it up for adoption. No one but a few people know, even less who'll talk about it. My mum has never recovered from being tricked into giving up her baby. I still wonder if this is what happened to my grandma. Or a termination. It was right before World War II, a really super fast whirlwind relationship before my grandpa was deployed. And their letters are really censored and vague, but there are strong hints of something that happened right after he was deployed. They were married for another almost 50 years after that, but they were both super messed up. They were really checked out as parents to my mom and her siblings. Ever since Mom finally got to read the letters, I thought there was probably a decision made that basically ruined the rest of their lives. My cousin, who's a principal, was married with kids and had an affair with a teacher. She was also married. They both ended both of their marriages and got together. The teacher was my math teacher at the time while all this happened. Now they're married and I see them at family reunions. Extremely awkward, but only for me. My brother's hoarding. He's been without hot water since October because there's no room to move the old water heater down from the second floor, which was a terrible design in the first place, admittedly. We're an Asian family and he's the firstborn son, so apparently mental illness is fine and dandy. The one time I mentioned he might have mental health issues, my mum shouted at me. They live in LA, and I worry when there's a big earthquake, he'll be seriously buried. I watched the Hoarders show to better understand him. He's a frugal, logical, cheap deal freebie hoarder, which is like the worst combination, because the argument, you should get rid of things to free up space in your house, holds no water to him. And every argument he makes for why he has 5 of this thing or why he picked up this free thing makes sense to him other than the fact that stuff is getting out of control and not even being used. He's an avid reader also and said Marie Kondo's book was triggering. The friend of a close cousin who, to put it lightly, horribly mistreated me. Everyone acts like it never happened. Better yet, he died a few years later, and they were all part of the big memorial that's become an annual thing. They even wear rubber bracelets for the motherfricker. Pretty much disowned all of my family. My God, I'm so sorry you had to go through that, and that your family essentially kept the trauma going. I'm glad you got out and didn't play to their BS. Although I'm sure that was a brutal process as well. My sister is really my half-sister. I didn't find out until I was like 35. My mum, and the fact that I have a different mum from my sister's. Oh, and how my mum died, or that I could have the same disease that killed her, and basically anything that deviates from the outward perception that we're the perfect little nuclear family. The fact that my brother and I still keep regular contact with our former stepfather. He and our mum got divorced 3 years ago. My brother and I still attend holidays with his side of the family, occasionally grab dinner, and get along well with his new fiancée. We don't tell our mum about any of this, although she's aware that we still talk to him. I mean, the man helped raise us, and we don't hold any grudges against him. Neither of us were willing to throw that relationship away simply because he and my mum weren't married anymore. Well, this is at least coming from a place of understanding, even if it's a bitter pill for one of your parents to swallow. I'm glad that adults can behave as such from time to time. My parents were never actually married and played it off like they were for 20 plus years. Oh, and my dad cheated on my mum with a guy who dresses in drag for a living. My mum's older brother is estranged from the family. Hasn't really spoken to anyone in the family for years, although he's sporadically in touch with my mum. I don't think he even called or sent condolences when my grandmother, his mum, died recently. My mum will bring it up sometimes like, oh, Alan has nothing good to say about our parents, but I tell him he needs to get over it, and yada yada yada. I can't even remember what she says because she's always really vague. Every single time I ask, why doesn't he talk to Grandma and Grandpa? She always says, oh, just because, and then frickin' drops it. So I guess that's the thing we don't talk about. Interestingly, several years ago, I asked my biological father, my mum's first husband, why my uncle doesn't talk to my mum or their parents, and he gave me an answer. He said, well, I guess no one's told you, but your grandfather used to do some pretty heinous stuff while they were growing up. He apologized later, and only she forgave him. And you know what? If I were in my uncle's position, I wouldn't frickin' talk to them either, to be honest. I haven't told my mum because while my father has never lied to me, this information is coming to me like secondhand, and I'm always wary of info like that. Also, that's not really a conversation I want to have with my mum unless she volunteers the info herself. And even then. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? So this is kind of a personal story that I still have no idea what actually happened, but I suspect night terrors. When I was in the 4th grade, I randomly hallucinated in the middle of the night that the walls and floor of my room were covered in huge spiders. And I don't just mean a few here and there, I mean the walls were made of spiders and almost forming hands to come out and grab me. And the worst part was I couldn't frickin' move the whole time. So I just stopped sleeping for a week, and then every time I tried to sleep after that, it kept happening. So I'd force myself to keep staying awake. Needless to say, my parents were terrified. I ended up in a hospital, and none of the tests came back with anything, and I was fighting any tranquilizer they gave me to not sleep. It was so bad I didn't sleep for so long that my brain was just trying to shut down. Eventually, they gave me a high enough powered med to keep an adult down, and after that, it happened again. My mother swears I was possessed, and I don't remember much about that week, but we just kind of pretend it never happened. Until I was 22, and hitting a super stressful patch of life in college, and it happened again. But I was older and able to recognize that it was sleep paralysis and some super messed up hallucinations. I think I've realized the incident back then was also sleep paralysis. I was just too young to really understand what was happening and was just too horrified to sleep. But my parents swear up and down to this day that it was demonic possession. My sister's weight. Extremely touchy subject. She started putting on the pounds at about age 11 and hit 375 before graduating from high school, along with her other eating disorder standbys like hoarding and hiding food and stealing money to buy it. Her efforts to lose weight included things like pinning swimsuit model pin-ups on the fridge for encouragement. It didn't help that she was emotionally fragile and had anger management issues. My parents apparently thought they could avoid conflict by banning all discussion of the most visible symptom of her failed coping skills, and boy, were they wrong. They didn't tolerate the lying or the stealing. There was some memorable shouting in our household, but there was absolutely no treatment for the actual addiction, the source of the conflict. How a group of my uncles and cousins, we're Latin and our family is huge, beat a man to death in broad daylight. My grandfather's second wife. She manipulated him to get most of his money, and when he died, she managed to get his gravestone inscribed only with words saying he was a loving husband to her and no mention of the rest of the family. She's a monstrous personality too. Mentioning her just tees my dad off and puts him in a bad mood for the rest of the day. We call her LV, or Lady Voldemort. My mother's mental health. She hallucinated off and on for years and was never totally stable. She didn't believe there was anything wrong with her and never got help. But she told everyone in the immediate family, and she's mentioned that over the years she's discussed her visions with various other people. Like, it's a known thing about her. But we never discussed it amongst ourselves at home when she wasn't in the room. Nobody outside of our immediate family, who also know about her condition, has ever brought it up to me. I think if a bunch of us were ever in the same room and the subject came up in conversation, all of our brains would melt and pour right out of our ears. The fact that 4 out of 6 children have left our parents' religion, which is a huge social stigma and personal disappointment for them. My great-uncle got his cousin pregnant in the 1930s and they had to get married. They had several children, and by all accounts their marriage was a happy one. It wasn't until I was putting together family trees, and both of them were long dead, that I realized what happened. My grandfather wasn't on speaking terms with his brother for a long time, not regarding this, but other family issues, so it was an easy subject to avoid. My 76-year-old grandmother died from over-medicating. When I reached the hospital, I saw the nurse start a Narcan drip. For those of you unaware, Narcan is used to reverse the effects of opiate overuse. My uncle had just died in a similar way 2 years prior, her mum died a year earlier, and my grandpa was moved to a nursing home weeks before, and I guess she just couldn't handle it anymore. She got into my grandpa's morphine left behind at the house. I loved and respected her. She was a respected woman. She was warm, kind, and had many friends, so my family wanted to keep who knew to a minimum. She was also a volunteer at the church, and you know how they can be with self-deletion. When she died, my aunt immediately said, "What will we tell people?" It was the most confusing time of my life. My grandfather came to the funeral, so confused, and he kept begging me to tell him what happened. Mind you, a year earlier they were both watching grandkids, living vibrant lives, and my grandpa still worked. It was devastating. Nobody talks about it ever. My grandfather died 12 days after her funeral. Which way does the ceiling fan turn? That one question led to a 3-hour argument between the aunts and uncles one Christmas. Absolutely stupid. If anyone mentions it now, looks of genuine anger appear and you are silenced. Ceiling fans are supposed to be designed to turn in either direction, to create a downwards draft to circulate cool air in the summer, or create an upwards draft to circulate warm air in winter. Well, I know which topic I'd be bringing up if a family get-together got boring or if people annoyed me. Just light that bag of doggy-doo on fire, back away, and enjoy the show. Yes, I am a crap jerk, thank you for noticing. We were in a cult for 10 full years. Now it's like a black hole in our family history. Nobody talks about it. The fact that my uncle has children with multiple working women in the Philippines and Cuba. My sister and cousin went on holiday with him and my cousin's family, and they walked in on him arguing with someone on Skype about child support, and then being sneaky little so-and-sos, they looked through his emails and found several emails with women with pictures and videos of different babies. Which was a massive jerk move, but they were no older than 11 or 12 at the time. I remember being told to never bring it up anywhere near my nanny, who was a hardcore Catholic woman, because it would likely be the death of her. He was, and still is, a bachelor, so fortunately there was no cheating or double life being lived, and we know they were working girls because he never hid the fact that he doesn't sleep with locals in these countries, just the ones he's paid. Uncle Jay loves his prozzies. When I was 8 until I was 10, I thought that the ghost of my grandparents' dog followed me around. I only ever imagined it, but the idea freaked my parents out, so they sent me to this kid therapy place. I don't know exactly what circumstances led to me being sent there, but I know there were only a few sessions and little progress was made. After one session, my dad told me to tell the therapist that I made everything up and that I meant none of it. However, there ended up being no further session for me to do so. I don't know why they ended or what specifically got me there in the first place, what the goal was, or why my dad suddenly wanted me to abruptly end the whole thing. What my parents never found out, I think, is that I also believed that I would legitimately gain superpowers, and this notion was connected to the ghost of my grandparents' dog. This whole time period is rather sensitive to me, even now, because I ruined the social life for my young self until we moved to a different town, for unrelated reasons. And I legitimately believed all of this. It scared my parents considerably that I might have some further undiagnosed mental disorder, although I'm fine now as far as I know, and it's not something I can just brush off as kid stuff. There was some serious delusional crap going on, and just because the delusions were obviously and expectedly childish, it doesn't mean that they weren't serious. It's not something that I nor my parents really want to bring up. I have a half-sister 3 years younger than me. My mum told me at age 21. Why we disassociated with a family friend. He's guilty of some pretty morally obscene stuff, and it took us 16 years to figure it out. My mum thinks that people are following her, bugging her house, hiding cameras in the attic, and it's kind of like a conspiracy theory. It's all in her head. Nobody says a word about it. It's pretty bizarre, being that I'm the only one my mum trusts to actually unload all of it on, and begs me not to tell my father because he'll just get mad and roll his eyes or shrug it off. But that's all I do is listen, because I don't want to feed further into her dementia. It's pretty sad. I want my mum back. Those empty wine boxes in the trunk of her car. My mum had a half-brother who was gay. My granddad, her father, kicked him out of the house when he was 18 after catching him with another man in the house. He died during the acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, better known by its acronym, epidemic in the 80s. And my granddad didn't go to the funeral. I've only ever heard the story once from my mum. None of her sisters or my grandparents have ever mentioned it. I don't think I was ever supposed to know, but it makes me sad knowing I had an uncle that I could have related to, and I'll never get the chance to know him. This question implies my family talks to each other in the first place. Me. I am the thing my mum and siblings and relatives don't talk about. Grandma's secret biscuit collection. You've got to risk it. Our feelings. My brother's mental disability. My cousin is adopted, so until he finds out from his parents, we don't talk about it. That I have an older half-brother who I've never met. My mum was a victim of the unspeakable act in her 20s, and at that time it was always the woman's fault, so she was forced to give him up. I know about it, I don't know if my dad does, and I know my brother doesn't. I don't know where to start looking. My aunt married one of those crazy Second Amendment narcissists. Anyhow, he immediately gets to work gaslighting and trying to drive a wedge between her and my grandparents. Husband comes up with the brilliant idea of convincing her she's adopted. The idea takes, and she becomes frickin' obsessed with it. Grandpa gets tired of the bullcrap and decides to have a paternity test done. Grandma argues against it and then reluctantly agrees, and the results come back. As it turns out, my aunt's crazy husband was half right. How my uncle and auntie are raising my little cousin really badly. He's severely obese and they don't care. They continue to feed him only with snacks and not real food. On top of that, he has a breathing problem because his parents smoke a lot ever since birth, and it's destroyed his lungs. The wholesale sellout by my mum, who had 4 of us, before she married the next man. After that, we didn't matter and his 2 kids did. It messed us real bad. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.